On one terrible day, a killer realized something. People are completely helpless. His newest victim begged him to stay back, but the madman kept stepping forward. He scraped his blade along the wall. Behind him lay a massive pile of corpses he slaughtered in cold blood. Grinning like a maniac, the psychopath hummed a quiet tune while his terrified target screamed for help, knowing damn well that nobody was coming. Shaking with fear, the man reached into his jacket for one final hope. He yanked out a pistol and fired wildly at his smiling attacker. Screaming that he was a monster, the shots did absolutely nothing. The killer just smirked, staying unbelievably calm as the bullets flew his way. Every single round got deflected midair, never even touching him. The victim kept shooting, but the monster just kept humming his tune. He danced around the gunfire. The poor man stood completely paralyzed. Before he could even process it, a thin line split his face. The gentleman was instantly sliced in half by the executioner standing yards away. Looking up, the bloodthirsty, cruel monster. Looking up, the blood-loving killer sang with joy because this was exactly what he wanted, with absolute. The tyrant sang out joyfully that this was exactly what he wanted, taking absolute pleasure as the villain wiped his mask with his stained hands. Laughing loudly and terrifyingly, right then a red-haired boy happened to be nearby watching the killer's actions with absolute shock. The madman continued planning his next moves, eager to take revenge on his next target. The terrified child was standing right where hundreds of innocent lives perished in the fire. The crazy killer laughed maniacally, pressing his blood-stained hands onto his mask, and, feeling completely satisfied with himself, the boy watched his every move with deep horror in his eyes, desperately trying not to attract any attention. Little Su Li looked around and suddenly saw something even more horrific, making his heart completely stop. The ruthless monster had brutally murdered his beloved parents, lying dead on the ground next to each other. 10 years had passed since that horrific incident, which claimed 231 innocent lives. After a long investigation into the Grand Tower fire, the authorities closed the case with a very simplistic conclusion. The investigators ruled it a mere failure to follow safety regulations, which sounded highly ridiculous and lazy. No one knew that the incident was not an accident, but a mass murder committed by a literal demon in human form. News outlets reported a theory that the disaster was deliberate, but our hero suddenly heard some loud shouting downstairs. A frustrated man down there yelled that his shirt was stained, but immediately started begging for forgiveness, drawing the attention of the red-haired youth. A blonde thug asked if the idiot really thought a basic apology would cut it, leaving the victim utterly speechless. One of the muscular thugs shoved the defenseless young man, who kept apologizing in a shaking voice, saying how sorry he was. The poor kid's begging had already irritated the bullies, who began brutally kicking and punching him on the ground. Lighting up a cigarette, their cold-blooded boss noted that this is what pathetic punks get for crossing him. Raising a hand, he ordered them to stop the beating. They held back just enough to keep the kid awake, which actually annoyed the bullies. Out of nowhere, a hand grips the bully's arm, telling him the kid has had enough. It is our hero himself, and the bully instantly tenses up at the sight of him. The thug is completely lost, while our hero keeps a cool head. He squeezes the opponent's wrist so hard the guy screams at him to let go. The blonde leader is panicking inside, wondering how this random freak can be so strong. Demanding to be let go, the angry bully yells, but the fearless Su Li has no intention of stopping. He unleashes a brutal punch straight to the face. A massive impact completely warps the thug's face, making him look like a fish. Stunned, the bully crashes to the dirt, finally drawing the attention of his friends. A furious crony screams, asking what this red-haired punk is doing. Barging into their business like that, instantly, the fat bully throws a heavy punch. But our hero stays perfectly calm, casually tilting his shoulder to the side. His big opponent misses completely, left utterly dazed and confused. He was so sure of his strength, wrong. But everything falls apart instantly, as Su Li wastes no time launching a counterattack. A brutal uppercut connects with his jaw, absolutely terrifying the other bully. His stunned comrade stands frozen, but our trained fighter has no mercy. He has zero intention of playing nice, turning around with incredible speed. He catches him right in the nose with a sharp whip kick. He did not even see it coming. In just a few minutes, the nimble Su handles all three bullies, saving the terrified kid from their clutches. Our save student is totally stunned, never expecting such incredible strength. From a complete stranger, admiring him, the boy asks if it is true that his savior is actually the new transfer student who arrived last week. But without warning, our fighter bluntly tells him to get lost. Leaving the kid in absolute shock, our hero obviously has no interest in chatting, demanding he leave right away, making him feel incredibly awkward. The fearless Lee casually asks if the kid wants to fight him too, but the boy quickly freaks out. Terrified, the student scrambles headlong off the rooftop, while the silent warrior simply watches him run. His gaze remains as cold as ice, giving him some quiet, but it does not last. Turning around, the brave youth realizes that the bully leader who was lying there is gone. His enraged blonde opponent has actually managed to scramble back to his feet, clutching a sharp knife as he sneaks up behind his rival for revenge. With zero hesitation, the thug lunges and stabs our hero, who does not even have time to react. He just stares in pure shock. Glancing down, the young man notices dark drops of blood pooling on the ground, which is definitely not a good sign. The desperate bully only stabbed him out of sheer terror, completely overwhelmed by what might happen next. But in a split second, the thug is left completely baffled because our hero simply moves his hand, revealing his stomach is completely unharmed. The bully, red-faced and trembling with stress, is frozen in disbelief at what he sees. Our expressionless fighter merely tightens his fist, preparing a massive swing, fully intending to finish this fight once and for all. A lightning-fast strike to the jaw lands with absolute brutal force. No mercy for a thug who had pushed his luck too far. The thug crashes straight onto his back, completely out cold. Su Li just stands over him, watching in dead silence. He slowly pulls out the blade wedged deep inside his bleeding palm. Keeping entirely still, he fights through the agonizing pain to free his hand. A pretty gruesome and gaping wound is left exposed right across his hand. It looks highly dangerous, but this kind of injury barely even registers to him. In just a few moments, the deep cut begins to heal on its own. In less than 2 minutes, the nasty injury is completely gone. Fully healed, he crouches next to the groaning punk. Reaching into the jacket, he pulls out a sleek steel lighter. A highly unusual, blood-red emblem is clearly engraved directly on the metal surface. Immediately, our hero recognizes the pattern. It perfectly matches the killer's flint. He still vividly remembers that horrific day of absolute tragedy. The demon who destroyed his life held an object with this exact mark. He had given up searching because the limited edition item was long discontinued. Shaking it off, he exits the area to make his next move. Later that evening, the young man is back home prepping for his hunt. A photograph of the brutal mass murderer is pinned to a dummy. Nearby is a childhood photo of him, surrounded by his loving parents. Sitting alone at the table, he focuses completely on his gear. With absolute focus, Lee finishes the job and sets the tool aside. Holding the fading photo, a heavy wave of raw sorrow strikes his heart. 10 long years ago, his peaceful life was violently shattered into pieces. He was left completely alone, forced to survive all by himself in a cold, unforgiving world. His entire childhood ended that day, leaving behind only this single precious family photo. Since then, a burning determination has fueled his every single step. You can bet he won't stop until his target is in the ground. The monster must pay, but Su Li knows he cannot act rashly. He has to keep a perfectly cool head to execute his ultimate revenge. Thankfully, his body's insane healing factor makes him a walking tank. But the massive problem is the complete lack of information on his target. The cursed killer goes by only one terrifying name, Jack. Some rumors say he is a crazy cannibal hunting for human flesh. Others whisper about a rogue scientist experimenting on victims for decades. Or maybe he is a highly decorated veteran with severe combat trauma. A broken soldier acting out his worst nightmares on innocent people. There are even rumors that Jack made a dark deal with the devil. Whatever the truth, he is clearly no longer quite human. His physical power is completely off the charts and highly lethal. This mess of rumors makes it pretty hard to find a starting point. But above all else, Su Li needs to become much stronger. He must be ready to end this demon with his own hands. A sharp notification chime rings out from the phone resting on the table, and immediately it catches his attention. The young man decides to check the text immediately, sensing it might be something pretty important. The leader of those street thugs is demanding he come. right now to an empty factory near the hill. Claiming things are far from over, this threat does absolutely nothing to the fearless fighter who is more than ready to teach that blonde punk another lesson. Smirking, he thinks to himself that a little extra practice never hurt anyone. Honestly, he actually wants a rematch. Meanwhile, the blonde bully is absolutely furious because he is now wearing a big white bandage over his busted nose, turning around. The punk reports that he sent the message exactly as ordered, but there is still one catch. He asks if his boss truly believes this idiot will show up just because of a text, and the older man is completely certain of it. After digging into the kid's background, he managed to uncover some incredibly interesting details. The owner of the service company, Ban Sungmok, reveals the kid has attended 12 different schools and started trouble at every single one. The confused blonde asks what this information actually proves. The bald boss finds it highly unusual that the kid got transferred here, not because he got kicked out but because he requested the transfer himself. This sounds incredibly bizarre to the blonde lackey, who still cannot make any sense of it. The tense thug asks if the guy is insane, transferring through 12 different schools. Ban Sungmok explains that this kid deliberately picks fights with everyone, from massive gang leaders down to ordinary school kids, until absolutely nobody is left to challenge him. Once he clears a school and runs out of faces to punch, our battle-hungry hero simply gets bored. The powerful owner of the shady service company wraps it up cleanly. The kid is completely obsessed with fighting. And that is the key takeaway here. Still, the nervous blonde guy suggests his boss should call in some serious backup rather than meeting this monster alone. But the heavyset boss, whose thick lips twist like a toad's, just laughs mockingly at the suggestion, leaving his henchman totally baffled. He finds his fear pretty ridiculous, overflowing with absolute confidence in his own power. He definitely does not need any assistance. Making a menacing face, the large man asks if the kid honestly stands a chance against him. The flustered blonde quickly claims he did not mean it that way, and Ban Sungmok tells him there is no need to worry, pursing his lips and puffing out his chubby cheeks. The bald giant begins doing something incredibly bizarre while the blonde subordinate watches in silence. Suddenly, the boss exhales a massive blast of energy capable of instantly vaporizing everything in its path. Paralyzed by the sheer shock, the underling freezes solid, terrified to make a single move. Glancing nervously to his side, the blonde guy wonders what on earth just happened. The solid concrete wall behind him is completely obliterated down to the rebar. Talk about an absolute shocker. This is the terrifying power of the boss, who looks like an out-of-shape joke, but actually has a truly monstrous secret. Grabbing another handful of snacks, the boss calmly points out that he is fundamentally different from that young fighter. Tossing more food into his mouth, the arrogant boss claims his title as an official contractor. Suddenly, Ban Sungmok opens its mouth opened wide, resembling a monster ready to pounce on anyone at any second. Meanwhile, an incredibly calm Su-Lei climbs up the unfinished building steps. This half-built structure was the exact spot for his promised meeting. He remembered the blonde guy who had boldly challenged him to a fight. Slipping his hands into his pockets, he looks around for his opponent. The entire place is eerily quiet and empty, which honestly just bores our fight-loving hero. With every passing second, he gets more and more annoyed by the silence. This whole setup feels way too strange, making him wonder if he got the wrong place. He quickly pulls out his phone to double-check the address he was sent. The text confirms he is in the right spot, meaning something else is going on. Su-Lei starts suspecting that these punks are just wasting his precious time. And he absolutely hates being played with. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes behind him. The strange sound instantly grabs his attention, snapping him out of his boredom. Though he cannot identify the sound, he immediately starts walking toward the source. Keeping his guard up, Su-Lei steps forward only to feel metal right under his shoe. He kneels down to get a closer look at whatever is lying on the floor. Scattered across the cold concrete are small bolts and metal nuts. He examines them closely and notices every single piece is dripping with blood. This discovery completely catches him off guard. The red liquid is still warm. That is a very bad sign, and his instincts instantly scream danger. Su-Lei slowly raises his gaze, searching the darkness ahead for any answers. Just a few steps away, he spots a severed, heavily bruised head of a bald man. The head is lying several meters away from its actual body. Worse yet, a terrifying, bloody grin is still plastered across its face. Su Li freezes in absolute shock. He can barely believe the horrific scene right in front of him. An intense wave of pure dread washes over his entire body. He instinctively jumps back with a yell, having never faced anything this graphic before. His mind is a complete mess as he tries to make sense of this madness. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoes from just a short distance away, making him tense up. He peers through the shadows and spots the blonde guy who originally challenged him. But right now, the challenger is in serious trouble, caught completely off guard. An unknown, terrifying thug is holding him tightly by the throat as he watches. Su Li silently looks on, debating whether he should even step in to help. The blonde punk is paralyzed with fear, barely even able to move or breathe. It turns out this is all the terrifying work of an infamous killer. It is Jack, and he happily declares this will be a bonus murder today. Su Li stands frozen. He cannot believe he is seeing this psychopath again. Just 10 minutes earlier, the terrified blonde had asked his strange contractor what was happening. He was utterly terrified by his sudden powers. A calm Ban Sung Mak explained that signing the contract grants you insane abilities. But there is always a catch. He must trade it for a life. Every now and then, he has to commit murder, with absolutely no way out of the deal. Panic-stricken, the blonde asks what that means and who he is supposed to kill. Ban Sung Mak simply smiles, telling him there is no need to rush things just yet. The wary man suddenly turned his head, sensing that something very strange was lurking nearby. Staring at the crooked doorway, the owner whispered that someone was there. Just then, a terrifying, smiling Jack peered out from the dark. The killer grinned wickedly, softly whispering that he had finally tracked down his targets. A stunned Hulk froze. Was this really the monster who killed so many? The psychopath stepped forward slowly, chuckling as he approached them. Chuckling softly, the vicious monster called the bald man Kid as Ban Sung tensed up. Ban Sung remembered being told that Jack had disappeared 10 years ago, yet here he stood. Time really flies, the psychopath remarked, slowly drawing out a long sword. The madman claimed he simply wanted to ask an old friend a question. Terrified but highly focused, the big guy prepared to launch his devastating special ability. He puffed out his lips, but the lightning-fast killer struck first. Jack clamped a hand over his face, shutting down his attack instantly. Veins rapidly bulged on the bald owner's head as he realized his situation was hopeless. He realized there was no escape. Survival seemed completely impossible. Jack offered absolutely no mercy, giving his struggling victim zero room to even breathe. Moments later, several bloody bolts and metal nuts clattered violently onto the cold floor. Ban Sung Mak was completely dead, his severed head resting in the killer's blood-soaked hand. Talk about a brutal finish, the psychopath just tossed the head aside like trash. Oops, he muttered coldly, while the terrified blonde boy with a broken nose fled. With a broken nose and a racing heart, the kid scrambled away. His mind was spinning in pure, unadulterated chaos, but his legs kept moving. Spitting bolts was crazy, but this new monster was clearly on an entirely different level. He could easily snap a man's neck like a dry twig without even blinking. The kid only wanted to avoid the new student, not face a killer. Su Li skidded to a halt as the smiling maniac suddenly blocked his path entirely. There was no escaping those dark eyes. The ruthless killer lunged forward. He grabbed the boy by the neck, squeezing the breath right out of him. Staring deep into his terrified eyes, the tyrant whispered a truly dark and chilling promise. "Everything will be over soon," he whispered, "and you won't feel a single thing." The terrified teenager choked, unable to believe his life was ending so quickly and absurdly. Suddenly, the killer paused. He sensed a stranger. A heavy presence loomed just a few feet behind him. The blonde boy gasped for air, his vision starting to fade. Just a few meters away, a shocked figure stood frozen and trembling in the shadows. It was Su Li, standing there, completely unable to believe his eyes. The killer grinned. Another fresh victim had delivered himself on a silver platter. He wouldn't even have to try very hard. The deeply shocked Su Li never expected to cross paths with this monster. This was Jack, the same ruthless psychopath who had murdered his parents years ago. For several agonizing seconds, they simply stared at each other in dead silence. The boy tried to convince himself that this nightmare was actually real. Jack squeezed the blonde boy's neck even harder, finding this whole situation highly amusing. He smirked, amused that a complete stranger somehow knew his name. "Do you want to play too?" But his heart was filled with a completely different kind of fire. Jack asked him to wait just a moment, saying he would finish choking his victim first, and then they could have some real fun. Su Li remembered that Jack was the monster responsible for all the horrors he had to survive on that terrible day. Clenching his fists hard, the brave teenager watched every move of the degenerate who kept on choking the poor boy with the broken nose. Mentally gathering his inner strength, our hero told the scoundrel that if he wanted to fight so badly they could have all the fun he wanted. Charging forward at lightning speed, the furious fighter called him a monster and swung right at his face. Still not taking him seriously, the psychopath smirked, noting the kid had some real guts, though that did not scare him. Reaching out, the killer reminded him that he had asked him to wait just a moment, but Su Li managed to wrench the half-dead blonde kid straight out of his bloody clutches. Seizing the moment, Su Li laid the unconscious victim gently on the floor, hoping to bring him back. Pressing two fingers against the boy's lips, he realized with dread that the kid was not breathing. Forcing himself to stay calm, he slowly stood back up to face Jack. The villain was standing a few steps away with his back turned. Listening closely to his words, Su Li demanded that they settle this right now instead of tormenting weak people. Jack turned around, looking at him in complete disbelief, utterly fearless, fueled by a sudden urge to kill. He grinned and shouted that in that case, things were about to get fun. Now the real clash begins. Jack throws a brutal punch, but Su Li slipped the attack effortlessly, acting as if nothing had happened, immediately swaying from side to side to avoid becoming a super easy target. Loving the thrill, the psychopath chuckled that the boy was dodging his strikes much better than expected. Suddenly, he decided to unleash a devastating rocket-like attack to end this fight instantly. The sheer honestly, how is he going to survive this? Su Li stays incredibly focused. The merciless killer refused to let him breathe, continuing his relentless and brutal onslaught. The concrete wall right behind Su Li was completely shattered by the impact, throwing sharp debris in all directions. No matter how fast Su Li could regenerate, this kind of power was too much. The young fighter knew that if he did not focus immediately, he would die. That was the harsh reality of his situation. Jack kept pressing the attack, keeping the boy cornered and slightly confused. Grinning wildly, Jack mockingly asked if he was really just a normal human, considering he was somehow managing to evade such highly destructive blows. He simply could not wrap his head around it, guessing that the boy possessed some kind of future-seeing ability. Hearing this made Su Li stop and think with a dead serious expression. Sure, having future sight would be incredibly convenient for him right now, but his dodge was just the result of a relentless hunt for this killer. It was impossible to trace them normally, since standard search engines could not access these hidden sites, so Su Li had to dig deeper. He searched every camera feed of Jack, still nothing. In a couple of clips, the psycho simply walked past the lens. Even in the final tape, the killer was too chaotic to analyze. He looked like an ordinary madman in weird clothes, no clues, nothing. It just seemed like he was out there thrashing random thugs. Su Li figured the madman must have spotted the camera back then. Maybe he was acting cautiously to keep his true face hidden. This was totally different from the terrors of his childhood days. Back in those days, people did not just drop dead from a single hit. Tired and bloodshot, the boy kept scanning the web pages for clues. Still, Jack's habits were clear enough for the young man to analyze. He replayed the footage thousands of times, despite his own grinding exhaustion. Slowly, he managed to memorize the killer's erratic combat style and sudden strikes. That preparation allowed him to easily slip past the blows of the giggling psychopath. Jack raised his hand, declaring that since the kid refused to talk, he would just beat the answers out of him. Su Li tensed, repeating in his head to focus entirely on his opponent's next move. He locked his eyes on Jack's feet as the killer crept closer. Suddenly, the demon lunged forward with a wild leap, forcing the boy to move. Timing it perfectly, Su Li prepared to unleash a counter of his own. Oh no, he totally miscalculated the speed. A brutal fist slammed into his chest, making him cough up blood. He was stunned by the terrifying velocity of the killer's ruthless blow. The monster had no plans of stopping, grabbing him to toss him aside. Su Li flew through the air, crashing violently against the stone wall. Smirking, the psycho mocked him, asking if the pathetic boy failed to dodge. Jack sarcastically apologized for being just a little too quick for him. The battered young fighter lay there, struggling to process what just happened. The impact was devastating, leaving him gasping for air in pure agony. Scratching his head, Jack assumed the kid was hurting pretty bad. He joked that he honestly thought the boy was going to dodge that. He knew the kid's internal organs were completely wrecked. The killer magnanimously offered to let him lie there and rest a bit. But Su Li suddenly spat out a rough command to shut his mouth. He dragged himself up on trembling legs, wiping blood from his lips. The determined warrior growled that their little game was only just starting. Jack froze in absolute silence, staring deep into the boy's defiant eyes. Stunned for a moment, the psychopath suddenly burst into cheerful applause. He cheered that this was magnificent, highly praising the kid's incredible willpower. He asked if it did not feel strange, but got no reply. Blood-drenched and grim, Su Li just glared back with absolute silence. Jack pointed out that even though the boy failed to avoid that strike, it almost felt like he had spent years studying and predicting every movement. Yet it was clear he could not actually see the future. Suddenly, Jack vanished behind him. Looking at the alarmed fighter, the smiling Jack asks who he is, terrified the young man. Swings a wild punch, but Jack easily dodges it without taking a scratch. Sidestepping a few meters, the lunatic notices that this kid actually knows his name. Jack wonders how the boy recognized him, but he gets no answer right away. Instead, the young fighter reveals that they actually met 10 years ago. He still remembers every detail of that nightmare. Su Li flashes back to the tragedy at the Grand Tower. Suddenly, the pieces click for the killer. Grinning, the polite Jack apologizes for not recognizing him despite their fateful meeting back then. He muses that 10 years ago, his opponent was merely a child. Then a sudden spark of recognition lights up his pale face. His cold blue eyes shine as he remembers a single survivor from that night. A crying little boy weeping over his parents' dead bodies. Enraged, Su Li clenches his fists and charges straight into the fray. Jack casually remarks that the boy has grown up. Desperate for revenge, the young man swings wildly, but his opponent easily slips away. Laughing mockingly, Jack tells him that these reckless attacks will never hit. He claims that mindless thrashing like this will never land a hit. Gritting his teeth in fury, the relentless young warrior refuses to back down. "We will see about that," Su Li roars as he pushes forward. He throws insults along with his punches, but Jack remains completely relaxed. Suddenly, the smiling psycho gets slashed deep across his throat. It is a pretty deep wound. Jack thought he was well out of range. He cannot comprehend how the blade reached him, without saying a word. Su Li simply flicks the blood from his hidden knife. Jack realizes the wild punches were just a clever distraction. Getting that knife close to his neck was the plan from the very beginning. Su Li stays completely silent, knowing he cannot afford to drop his guard. Instantly, the maniac retaliates, unleashing a brutal and lightning-fast strike. The brutal blow catches Su Li off guard, forcing him backward. Smiling, the psycho says he would hate for this fun to end too quickly. Though Su Li is bleeding, Jack is thrilled that the boy survived his counters. He is genuinely impressed that this rookie managed to draw first blood. Even more amazing is how the boy keeps standing after taking fatal damage. Su Li stays quiet. He does not have the strength to speak anymore anyway. His exhausted body is trembling violently from the sheer physical strain. He has nothing to say as the long-haired killer continues to ramble. Suddenly, Jack stops and asks if the rumor of his regeneration is true. The realization seems to blow the psycho's mind completely. It is the only logic, given how he moves with shredded organs. And 10 years ago, he somehow survived a lethal stab wound, too. Now the truth is clear. The killer is dying to know his secret. He wonders how on earth Su Li obtained such a valuable ability so young. Suddenly, the maniac's eyes go wide, his pupils shrinking with manic excitement. The psycho bursts into mad laughter as the tense hero waits. Su Li couldn't quite grasp what the guy meant. The murderer boasted that he had taken countless lives, but this was his first time encountering someone with insane regeneration. The bleeding fighter was completely terrified. He struggled to maintain a cool head and fight the panic. His recovery was slowing down, and if this kept up, things were about to get way worse. Jack asked if his opponent, just like Piccolo from Dragon Ball, could regrow a severed limb. Sweat dripped down the terrified kid's face as he realized that was impossible, and absolute dread filled his soul. The psycho didn't plan on playing nice, raising his hand directly in front of him. Preparing to strike, the demon chose a brutal slashing technique to run a twisted experiment on the helpless youth. Right then, Su Li was deeply sliced again, fresh blood spraying everywhere. Laughing like a maniac, the killer proudly noted that he had hit his mark, extremely pleased with himself. The stunned boy slowly realized that the razor-sharp weapon had hit him straight in the leg. This was catastrophic. Suddenly, the young fighter screamed out that his leg was gone. Even the killer went completely silent, unable to bear the agony. The boy couldn't stop his tears as he squeezed his jaw tight. Still, the blinding torment wouldn't fade away. He sobbed that this was the end, but the psycho shook his head, asking if that was really all. Now the madman knew a severed limb won't grow back, meaning the kid was completely finished. Jack couldn't fathom how the boy survived 10 years ago, wanting to conduct a few more twisted tests, but he was in a massive rush, he said. This was his first try, so it was rushed, while Su Li could barely speak through the agony. Cracking open a massive can of gasoline, the long-haired lunatic told him to smile. The cold-blooded killer started splashing the fuel everywhere, getting ready to light a massive fire. The maniac mockingly told Su Li to pretend that birthday candles were about to be lit, as if they were celebrating a special birthday. Tossing the fuel canister aside, he corrected himself. Today was actually his death day. Grinning wildly, he struck the flint, adding that this big moment deserved a proper spark. The battered fighter called him a sick monster, struggling to stand and stop this. The killer had no intention of stopping, muttering that it was time to start the fiery celebration. His thumb slid slowly over the lighter wheel to ignite it, creating a highly tense moment, with fuel sloshed everywhere. Starting a massive blaze would be child's play for the psycho, but suddenly, wait for it, his trusty lighter, which had never failed him once, completely failed to spark. Keeping his cool, the killer figured it was just broken, no fire. Then, out of nowhere, a handful of searing red dust blasted into his eyes. Grabbing his smoking face, the maniac dropped to his knees, screaming in pure agony, trying to comprehend what just happened. His flesh was melting, leaving him utterly helpless. He couldn't wrap his head around it, clueless about what this substance actually was. Meanwhile, a smug Su Li smiled, knowing his opponent had fallen right into his trap. He felt pretty proud. He had carefully studied all the rumors about Jack. Our guy uncovered a hidden detail: fire, a devastatingly powerful technique. Across countless stories, Jack seemed to show up in every single incident. That fateful day 10 years ago was no exception. The tool used to spark those flames. The young kid actually saw it with his own eyes. The killer held a rare, limited edition lighter. It was a unique model, completely discontinued over 20 years ago. Fortunately, our hero grabbed that exact model during an old brawl with the blonde guy. After breaking the psycho's nose, he took the item and diligently modified it. He added racinophoratics to give it a deadly kick. Just 1 gram of this stuff is usually enough to guarantee a horribly painful death. And now Jack had to feel it. Su Li just smiled, watching in silence. The young fighter stopped screaming, completely ignoring the agonizing pain throbbing in his leg. You see, every single attack Su Li unleashed earlier was a clever distraction. He made his opponent believe he was going straight for the throat, thoroughly confusing him. He kept the killer off balance, even slicing a shallow cut right across his neck. But in reality, our clever fighter was playing a completely different game here. He executed his real plan with absolute surgical precision the entire time. The young man was actually aiming for the pocket of his furious, completely helpless enemy. Jack could do nothing to fix this. He thought he had been generous to the kid. Yet the boy repaid that generosity with pure malice, which deeply offended the psycho. Jack had dealt with poison plenty of times before, but he was absolutely livid now. He screamed that he would never forgive Su Li for ruining his perfect mood. Jack threatened to tear off his remaining limbs and slice him into tiny pieces. The psycho desperately wanted to butcher the kid who had caused him so much pain. Suddenly, the killer froze. The boy had completely vanished from his sight. Before he could react, the nimble kid had already slipped right behind him. He leaped high into the air, putting maximum weight behind his strike. His grip was unbelievably tight, as raw, blinding fury completely consumed his mind. The bewildered killer simply couldn't comprehend how any of this was possible. After all, he had literally chopped off one of the kid's legs earlier. And get this, the real shock came just a moment later. Jack's head popped right off, flying through the air like a soccer ball. Our young warrior didn't hesitate for a second, cleanly decapitating his foe. 10 years ago, because of this monster, the boy had learned a crucial lesson. A hard, brutal truth. Severed body parts don't just grow back, but if reattached, recovery is possible. Su Li remembered crying and bleeding as a helpless child. Now the exhausted young man fell to his knees, letting his bottled-up emotions escape. He was just so incredibly tired, the blood-stained cleaver slipped from his hands. This weapon had finally put an end to the murderous monster named Jack. Right in front of him lay the lifeless corpse of the brutal killer. This was the demon who slaughtered his parents all those years ago. But now he had finally avenged them as the heavy exhaustion set in. He began giggling to himself, looking completely unhinged, but he just could not. Hold it in, covered in blood, Su Li screamed at the top of his lungs to ease the suffocating anxiety tearing at his soul. Slowly, he went quiet and focused on his thoughts, finally accepting that this horrible nightmare was all over. Letting out a weary sigh as he stared up at the sky, he whispered that it was finally done. For several minutes, Su Li just stood there, staring down at Jack's lifeless, bloody body, which did not even twitch. But then a raspy voice suddenly called out to the young man, begging for forgiveness. It sent a chill down his spine. The startled fighter whipped around instantly, unable to believe his own ears. This had to be a trick, but horror was very real. The surviving killer asked if he was truly sure. Everything was over. Su Li froze dead in his tracks, completely lost for words. The terrified young warrior stared open-mouthed at the severed head lying on the ground, which was still somehow talking. The psycho admitted he had no idea how he was still alive and breathing. Honestly, this is pure nightmare fuel. Flashing a sickening, annoying grin, the monster told him that he was not dead yet, leaving Su Li completely baffled. How was this even physically possible? Jack claimed he did not know either, but this was a bizarre, undeniable truth. Losing his mind, Su Li grabbed the severed head by its hair, screaming that he should be dead. Why was he still breathing? The creepy killer just chuckled, repeating that he truly did not know the reason, even joking that Su Li should go easy on him since it was his first time. Then the grinning psycho asked why the kid looked so shocked. After all, the kid had just reattached his own leg like it was nothing. The leg still looked damaged, but it was fully functional again, veins pulsing under the skin. Driven into an absolute, blinding rage by this mockery, the furious young man slammed Jack's talking head straight into the dirt with brutal force. Su Li snarled that if taking his head off did not kill him, then there was only one final, extreme option left. Without wasting another second on useless chatter, he grabbed his blood-soaked blade to end this absolute circus, raising the weapon. He glared down and swore he would chop his enemy's skull right in half. But the killer did not show a single shred of fear. Instead, he looked right at the young fighter to ask a sudden question. The bloody demon asked a bizarre question, but Su Li just stood there, unable to understand. Jack then asked if it was true that he wanted to avenge his dead parents, but the young warrior still had no idea what he meant. Gritting his teeth in fury, Su Li snarled that this was why he was doing this. Hearing this, Jack realized the kid genuinely did not know the truth, or was just pretending to be clueless, so he decided to spell it out. Out of nowhere, the killer revealed he did not kill Su Li's parents, instantly shaking the young man to his very core. Seconds later, a dark smile crept across his face, and he even chuckled in a bizarre way. Soon, he was laughing like a complete madman, gripping his blade with white knuckles, swinging furiously at Jack's head. He screamed that the bastard was just trying to lie to save his own skin, knowing his death was close. But with a smirk, the killer replied that he had given up on his life a very long time ago. Instead, he wanted to shock the boy back to reality. The demon pointed to the bald corpse, forcing him to remember the exact moment of his parents' sudden deaths. The psychopath mockingly reminded him that on that horrific day, mangled bodies and severed limbs littered the ground, yet the boys' family didn't have a single scratch on them, which made no sense. Su Li screamed at the monster to stop spewing lies, stubbornly refusing to believe his twisted stories. Suddenly, strange noises echoed behind him, making him spin around on high alert. Sun Hong still lay on the cold floor with a shattered nose, completely forgotten by Su Li and Jack. The killer suggested they simply leave, while the groaning blonde struggled to shift his battered body. Aching in absolute agony, Jack warned that things would get very bad if. The groaning kid woke up, but Su Li stayed dead silent. By the following morning, Su Li was sitting in class with a pounding headache. Endlessly analyzing the nightmare, the student knew deep down that he hadn't imagined a single detail of that horrific night. It was all real. Suddenly, a classmate asked why he looked so miserable, joking if he had actually killed the annoying new transfer student, but Su Li didn't even register the question at first. Blinking, he asked what they said, prompting his friend to ask again if he had finally taken care of that obnoxious bully. The chuckling classmates mentioned that the idiot had been missing for 3 whole days, though before that, he did nothing but irritate everyone. They jokingly praised Sun Hong as a hero while, drenched in a cold sweat elsewhere, that very blonde tried to piece together a chaotic sequence of events, recalling how his body had violently spasmed. On the floor, as the memories rushed back, he let out a sharp, terrified scream consumed by overwhelming dread, bolting upright and gasping for air. The panicked blonde clutched his own throat, desperately trying to suck in oxygen. Sun Hong's entire body throbbed with a sickening, heavy ache. As he shakily surveyed his surroundings, barely a meter away, he spotted a lifeless body. It was Ban Sun Mok, completely decapitated. The gruesome sight instantly paralyzed the boy, his face draining of color at such a horrific scene. He instantly flashed back to the moment when that monstrous killer Jack had locked a hand around his neck and choked him. Overcome by sheer, unadulterated terror, the teenager shrieked at the top of his lungs and bolted from the alley, collapsing onto the hard pavement. Sun Hong, with trembling fingers, dialed the emergency hotline, knowing he had to report this madness. But then, a sudden thought froze him. What happened to Su Li, the target he originally lured out? To settle their grudge, the terrified teen was too shaken to return and investigate. But he knew the kid might have been brutally murdered while he lay unconscious. And let's be real, they probably got rid of him too, explaining his mysterious absence from school over the past few days. Panic gripped him tightly as he realized the police would immediately suspect him of murder if the body was found. Scurrying back outside, the anxious boy lit up a cigarette to settle his racing heart, though the relentless dread wouldn't subside. Suddenly, a stern woman's voice barked behind him, stating that smoking was strictly forbidden right on the school grounds. His cigarette is suddenly swiped away. Sun Hong turns around in a fury, demanding to know what she thinks she is doing. She is not playing around. She tells him she heard some very bad news about him picking on the defenseless younger kids. Despite her warning him to respect school policy, it turns out his own younger sister, Sangju, is the one constantly scolding him to act like a decent human being. She feels incredibly ashamed of him in front of the student council, but her irritated brother just tells her to get lost. She does not stop, pointing out that he has also been targeting the new student. Seeing her get worked up, the guy next to her gently asks her to stay calm. He is actually pretty pleased to meet Sun Hong, even though it is their very first time meeting. The polite student introduces himself as Hua Jaihe, who is a very close friend of Sangju. He calmly mentions he has a couple of quick questions regarding Su Li Wu, which instantly leaves the blonde bully completely puzzled. The polite student notes that they are actually in the same class, and he wants to know why the boy has been missing for several days now. The angry bully snaps back that he is not the kid's keeper. He has no idea. But the polite student points out that the newcomer only recently arrived as a transfer, and the blonde bully was one of the few classmates he interacted with. Sun Hong gets defensive and snaps that he does not care about some parentless kid. He turns his back and walks away. This makes Hua Jaihe realize that he might have to investigate the guy directly, since something feels highly suspicious. Hearing those words, Sun Hong freezes in his tracks, spinning around instantly to make sure he heard that threat correctly. He demands to know if the student actually has the transfer kid's address. He says yes. Murder is a sin, but people with superpowers mock that common sense. Lacking any self-control, they abuse their authority and run wild without any consequences. But can you even call them human anymore? The absolute power that shields them from justice ultimately turns them into monsters. He understands this truth. These elite powerhouses are known as executors, and they ruled that fateful night. They were present in the Grand Tower. Jack, currently clinging to life, confirms it. This is the brutal truth. Our cold-blooded protagonist listens closely to his captive, the killer's severed head, crudely mounted on a mannequin, begs him to believe this desperate confession. But the silent young man refuses to offer a quick reply. Keep quiet, he tells the monster to speak only when he is asked, before demanding to know what other dark secrets the man is hiding. He strictly orders him to name the beast who slaughtered his parents. On that terrible day 10 years ago, he stutters. The psychopath freezes up. He stutters and avoids giving a straight answer, which only fuels the boy's rage. No idea, he claims he doesn't know, frustrating the boy who wanted details. Grabbing him tightly by his hair, Su Li Wu orders him to stop lying. The terrified killer desperately begs for mercy as the vengeful boy glares back. He knew absolutely nothing and remembered very little, meaning he could not help at all. At the same time, Jack had not just lost tiny memories, everything was gone. Absolutely nothing specific remained in his head from the last 10 years. The cold killer wanted answers just as badly as the kid who did it, finally letting go of his hair with a rough shove, stepping back. The fighter wondered what he had even hoped to get from this useless guy. He coldly told the captive to forget everything, repeating that he was completely useless. Drawing a razor-sharp sword, the merciless killer added one final, terrifying detail. He did not need Jack anymore and was going to finish him right now. Meanwhile, further down the street, a highly anxious Sun Hong paced quickly when he suddenly tripped, his leg giving out completely. Groaning in pain, he asked how much longer they had to walk, but Hua Jai-hee calmly replied they were almost there. The nerd told him to make a left turn here, while the blonde guy grumbled silently about how the new guy lived in the absolute middle of nowhere. At the same time, he kept telling himself to just hang in there and find out if their friend was still breathing. A few minutes later, they finally reached the building entrance, which looked so incredibly ordinary that it felt weird too. Sun Hong heading up the stairs, the two guys began knocking hard on Su Li's apartment door and calling his name, but there was only silence. Panicked Hua Jai-hee asked what their next move was since the place was completely empty, and the blonde guy started sweating bullets. Shaking with nerves, he realized it was still possible to head back to the old factory where they originally planned to meet. The smart, bespectacled guy turned to his highly anxious, nail-biting partner, demanding to know his thoughts. Staying totally calm, he asked if something terrible could have happened to their missing friend, sending Hoon into a complete spiral, angrily stomping on the floor. The frustrated kid yelled that he was totally done with this, leaving the quiet nerd completely confused by his sudden outburst. Hoon quickly muttered that the new guy was probably just sick, trying to force his own racing mind to calm down. He offered a weak smile, saying that was definitely possible, which made Hua Jai-hee ask why he looked happy. Right then, the nerd announced he had successfully finished what he was working on. As the door clicked open, dumbfounded, Sun Hong asked how on earth he bypassed the lock but got no reply. He nervously asked if breaking into someone's apartment was actually okay, but the smart guy simply stated that the target might be in serious danger. Still, the blonde was obsessed with how he picked the lock, but the nerd replied that tracking down Su Li was their top priority. Honestly, this whole situation felt incredibly sketchy and wrong, but he had to deal with it. Sun Hong realized their missing friend definitely was not inside the apartment and must still be at the warehouse, but he chose to keep his mouth shut. The sharp-eyed Hua Jai-hee quickly guessed that his partner knew exactly what happened to the missing guy, which terrified Hoon even more. The sweating, anxious kid wondered if he should just confess everything right now, and honestly, who wouldn't? Unbeknownst to him, the nerd quietly gripped a heavy hammer, staring intently at the trembling, terrified boy in front of him. With a dark, knowing smirk, he muttered that if his suspicions were true, he was going to need Hoon to cooperate. These global killers, known as the Executors, operate silently all over the world. They keep in touch solely through a mysterious program called mutual understanding. To join their ranks, a person has to track down the dark web. There they can get the secret app installed directly onto their phone. That is exactly what Su Li decided to do, heading to an abandoned, hidden area. A place completely cut off from the public, adjusting his black face mask. The quiet fighter remembered that the psycho himself had given him these exact coordinates. Approaching a heavy iron door, he reached out and calmly turned the handle. He slowly pushed the door open, trying to make as little noise as possible. He peered into the darkness, straining his eyes to see what lay inside. Suddenly, his face went pale, his eyes widened as if seeing a ghost. But there was nothing there, just a completely empty building covered in dust. Trash was scattered everywhere. Holding his head, he let out a frustrated sigh. He could not believe he had actually fallen for that crazy killer's lies. He should have known better. Furious, Su Li slammed his backpack onto the dusty floor. He cursed that absolute bastard Jack for playing him like a fool. Gritting his teeth, he swore he would hunt down this clown and make him pay dearly. But wait, just as he is about to lose his mind, a notification suddenly lights up his phone screen. He pulled the device out, surprised to find he actually had cell reception here. His eyes went wide all over again. The message was completely unexpected. It was from his classmate, Hua Jai-hee, offering him a mysterious gig. He wanted to meet up to arrange the details. Su Li stood there completely speechless. He did not know how to respond. Offers like this did not happen every day. Then another text popped up. Hua Jai-hee said they had a lot to discuss. He even attached a photo of their classmate Sun Hong, tied up and unconscious. Su Li stared at the screen. What on earth was going on here? Meanwhile, in a dark room, the tied-up blonde guy slowly opened his eyes. With heavy tape sealing his mouth, Sun Hong struggled to focus his blurry vision. Realizing he was trapped, he glared at the quiet, nerdy guy standing nearby. Calmly pouring a fresh mug of tea, the classmate flashed a creepy, innocent smile. He softly mentioned that he was starting to worry the kid had actually died. He laughed, calling it a total miracle that Sun Hong had survived that blow. It is not easy waking up after getting bashed in the head with a hammer. He insisted he tried to hold back. Then, he asked if he wanted painkillers. Sun Hong wept in silence, terrified of what this utter psycho wanted from him. He had no clue where he was or why this monster had dragged him here. He could not even scream. Then, behind his captor, he spotted 2 dead bodies. Absolute panic set in. Sun Hong thrashed wildly in his chair, trying to scream. But his desperate, muffled whimpers did not seem to bother the glasses-wearing killer. He simply chuckled, gently telling the terrified boy there was no need to panic. He pointed behind him, explaining those were actually just highly realistic training mannequins. Hearing they were just plastic replicas, Sun Hong let out a shaky, desperate breath. But then, with a chilling grin, the killer added a terrifying detail. The real corpses had started to smell, so he had to throw them out. He promised to embalm Sun Hong next, saying expense was no issue for friends. He tried to act tough, but inside, the blonde boy was in a complete state of panic. His heart raced. Suddenly, a masked stranger burst inside and hurled a razor-sharp weapon. It was a massive meat cleaver, designed to easily sever limbs in a single strike. No matter how tough the target was, this blade would slice right through them. The blonde kid instantly blacked out on the floor, while Hua Jai slowly stood up. He rose from his knees, just as a completely out-of-breath Su Li ran in. The hero wanted to handle this mess quickly and figure out exactly what was happening. Glaring coldly at the intruder, the warrior demanded to know his name and motive. The mysterious text came straight from him, after all. The smug nerd asked if he really did not recognize him. He reminded the fighter they were actually classmates, even if they rarely talked. Sure, they did not hang out, but that changed absolutely nothing now. But Su Li did not care about high school memories. He wanted direct answers. He asked if this four-eyed kid was truly the performer, making the nerd smile. The boy seemed amused, teasing the hero before asking for just 1 quick minute. Reaching into his pocket, the four-eyed kid slowly pulled out his smartphone. He flashed the screen right in front of Su Li, his annoying grin widening. Honestly, that smug look is begging for a punch, so Su Li charges. He snatched the phone right out of his hands, catching him totally off guard. The nerd was genuinely shocked by such raw agility, but quickly regained his cool. Hua Jai laughed. He praised the hero for being so quick on the uptake, then suddenly lunged, throwing a heavy punch straight at Su Li's chest, forcing the hero to leap back. Su Li landed gracefully on one hand, while Hua Jai calmly explained his point. He knew that this phone was the literal key to running the app. It looked like any normal phone, but they were not here to fight today. He wanted to offer a deal, calling it a simple favor for a favor. But a wary Su Li was not buying it, highly suspicious of his real goal. The nerd casually admitted he had broken in and searched the apartment earlier. He uncovered some highly intriguing clues that he simply could not ignore. A note proving Su Li was tracking down performers. That was why he decided to offer his assistance, but the hero refused outright. He had no interest in teaming up with an arrogant home invader. Slamming his heavy backpack onto the floor, the swift warrior prepared for combat. He let his actions do the talking, reaching down for his weapon. Gripping his machete, he warned the four-eyed stalker he would pay dearly. His gaze was lethal and completely focused. This guy had pushed him too far. The absolute disrespect of this intruder made his blood boil. Nerd stood frozen, almost unable to believe the situation was escalating so fast. Instead, he grabbed his head in disbelief, not wanting to fight. He realized Su Li really did not know who he was threatening. In a flash, the smug kid rushed straight toward the armed warrior. Su Li was taken aback by the sudden, reckless charge. Before he could raise his blade, a lightning-fast kick struck him clean in the face. Smirking, Huajai asked if the boy truly believed he stood a chance. The furious fighter was not about to give up so easily, so he lunged forward, trying to grab him by the throat. The calm, bespectacled man was surprised, yet remained completely cold. Honestly, he was impressed by the powerful Su Li. Managing to block that sword strike and escape unharmed, smiling, Jia praised him, pointing out that a turned blade could have easily wounded him. The stern warrior snapped at him to shut up, claiming that it would be effortless to dodge and counterattack anyway, still playing his game. The youngster leaped back, laughing and agreeing with him. The cunning nerd wanted more fun, so he immediately came up with something new while the emotionless hero just listened to him silently. Grabbing a hammer, he casually asked if the brave fighter could handle him. Wielding this weapon instead, without any warning, he rushed into the attack, aiming straight for his head, but the hero managed to parry it. He was annoyed that his opponent was only blocking instead of counterattacking. Swinging again, Jia warned that if this kept up, he would have to finish off Su Li. The crazy, bespectacled fighter was acting totally unhinged, but that did not scare our main character at all. Still, the cunning trickster moved faster, striking him hard right in the chest and sending him flying backward. His sharp sword fell to the floor, and his opponent asked if he could really keep fighting without a weapon. The annoyed young man told him to shut up, then felt something strange in his left hand. Looking down, he noticed his arm shape had become completely warped, and here is the kicker, the cunning Jia explained that he had used an acupuncture strike, rendering his opponent's arm completely useless for the next couple of hours. Troubled, Li realized that his regeneration was not working, assuming the injury was not serious enough to trigger the skill. His opponent told him to relax and tossed something heavy right at him. While keeping a nasty smile on his face, emotionless, the hero caught the hammer, completely confused about why any of this was necessary. The polite Jia reminded him that he had not initiated a fight, and added that he would help him get the target's phone number, but at the same time he warned that in return, the hero had to prove something, and the fighter, looking at him suspiciously, asked what. The clever guy stressed that the performer must be ruthless, and all that was required of him was to kill someone. As an example, his classmate pointed to Sun Hong, who was lying unconscious on the floor, shocking Su Li. Seeing the guy's dead serious expression, the bespectacled man asked why he was so worried. Keeping a cool head, the fighter asked if that single action would really be enough. The enthusiastic young man told him to just do it and ignore the rest. Silently looking at the hammer, the calm hero began to turn thoughts over in his head, mentally preparing himself. For the first few seconds, he simply stared at the unconscious Sun Hong, who was completely useless to anyone right now. After that, the brave he threw the steel hammer forward instantly, showing absolutely zero hesitation. Jia, he grew incredibly tense, totally caught off guard by the incoming attack. The heavy hammer came flying right at him, making his eyes widen in pure shock. This was completely unexpected, but the ruthless fighter refused to wait around. Su Li immediately rushed forward to attack, ready to cut down his opponent. With a sharp strike, his sword sliced right through Jia's glasses. The broken pieces clattered to the floor. Blood splattered everywhere as the cold-blooded fighter asked a chilling question. Did he really have to take a life just to prove his own cruelty? After that brutal strike, Jia, he just stood there quietly with his back turned. Completely emotionless, he muttered that there was no point in talking anymore. Meanwhile, a steady stream of blood dripped down from the cut on his forehead. Su Li refused to stop, realizing his first strike had not been deep enough. Without wasting another second, he lunged forward for a second assault. He aimed to deliver a devastating and incredibly brutal blow. But this time, his opponent was fully prepared to defend himself. The young warrior glared, realizing the other man was hiding a dangerous secret card. Staring back coldly, he admitted he had expected much more from him. Suddenly, the heavy steel sword slipped out and clattered onto the floor. This was a terrible sign, and our main character immediately felt a jolt of panic. He realized his enemy had used some strange technique to completely paralyze his arm. He stepped closer, noting how rarely newcomers actually joined them. Furthermore, he wanted to support Su Lei in this place, even imagining they could become close partners who trusted one another. Someone he could truly depend on. Then his expression turned dark as he called the boy a total bastard. He snarled that the boy ruined all his plans as he clenched his fist. The psychopath was clearly done playing, but Su Li tried to keep his cool. Believing he could block whatever came next, he braced for impact. A heavy blow slammed right into our hero's jaw with terrifying accuracy. The impact was so severe that it nearly shattered his teeth. Only then did the young warrior realize he still could not feel his arm. Completely helpless, his enemy was left wide open to any attack. He threatened to butcher him, just like he originally planned. Su Li collapsed to the ground, his mind spinning as he struggled to comprehend. The psycho sneered that the boy would make a perfect little guinea pig, telling him they would have plenty of fun during his sick experiments. If the kid happened to die halfway through, well, it was no big loss. After all, who would actually go looking for a useless orphan anyway? To the villain, this whole situation was a win-win. Fueled by pure rage, Su Li launched a sudden, unexpected kick. It was a desperate move that caught the smug villain off guard. He wondered what kind of cheap trick this was, but he still managed to dodge the physical strike in time. Meanwhile, our angry hero struggled to get back on his feet for another clash. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect opening. Then he drove a devastating heel kick straight into the nerd's gut. The furious four-eyed glasses guy immediately wanted bloody revenge. He never expected that low kick, and now his balance was totally ruined. Wobbling violently, the man desperately tried to keep his footing. A thick cloud of heavy dust swirled around them from the impact. It made breathing in this stuffy, cramped room almost impossible. Grabbing his hammer, the pissed-off fighter spat that using kicks was cheating. But our hero, Su Lei, did not offer a single word back. He had a good reason. Our hero was still lying flat on the cold floor, slowly recovering. Finally pushing himself up, Su Lei muttered that it was worth a shot. Even if it sounded reckless, he admitted he could not do this alone. It was a pathetic plea, and the glasses guy mocked him. He sneered that Su Lei realized his weakness way too late, but then his grin died. A terrifying, raspy voice nearby spoke up, saying the help was not for him. The creepy words came right from Jack's severed head, resting on the floor. Su Lei glared at the head, telling it to shut up and do its job. Stunned Jia demanded to know what was happening as the killer cackled. Earlier at home, Su Lei regretted ever listening to this absolute psychopath. Jack had been completely useless, so our hero decided to put him down. With no use for him, Su Lei raised his weapon to end it. The cold-blooded warrior swung his blade straight at the tyrant's head. He was ready to rid the world of this monster forever. But at the very last millisecond, his hand froze as an idea sparked. He actually did not have to kill Jack, and Jack did not look scared. Instead, he could use this creepy psycho to hunt down the other conspirators. Using Jack to find and destroy everyone in cahoots with him would be much faster. Hearing the plan, the cunning killer just smirked, ready for the ride. Su Lei gave him a simple deal: die right now, or help him hunt. Helping would buy him time. Now back in the present, Jia panicked. The injured four-eyed fighter was terrified, completely out of his depth. Talk about an absolute nightmare situation for him. Sarcastically, Jack's head asked his host how he could be of service. Su Lei replied that he would drag him everywhere. Glaring at his opponent, the warrior gave the order. He commanded his creepy new ally to bite him immediately. Jia stood completely frozen in sheer confusion, too terrified to even move. Opening his monstrous jaws wide, Jack lunged directly toward the boy. He was ready to bite, while the smug glasses guy scoffed. The nerd yelled that they were just bluffing and could never win. But in a split second, his arrogant expression completely shattered. This bizarre, horrific outcome was nothing like what he expected. He screamed, demanding to know why Jack bit Su Lei instead of him. But the severed head kept gnawing on Su Lei's shoulder in silence. The boy's question only brought amusement. His opponent had actually decided to back off. From his hands, completely terrified of becoming a guinea pig, just a few seconds. Later, Su Lei slowly rose back to his feet, feeling incredibly cheerful. Stretching his arms, the fighter made it clear he was tired of Hua Jai. His endless trash talk and overly confident attitude, the stunned youngster couldn't believe that his opponent's shoulders were actually healing. And at an incredibly rapid pace for this regeneration to trigger, the injuries had to be extremely severe, which is why Jack's bite was absolutely necessary. It required deep stab wounds or torn flesh, which was exactly what his clever opponent targeted. Feeling encouraged, Su Lei noted that his damaged hands were fully restored, making him a deadly threat once again to his foe. Dropping into a combat stance, he boldly declared he would finally shut up the annoying nerd who bored him to death. Adjusting his hair, the bespectacled man admitted that healing was impressive, but insisted it would not save him. Leaping high, Hua Jai swung his massive hammer, screaming that he would crush the kid into a human punching bag, but the cold-blooded warrior shattered his arrogance with a devastating counterstrike straight to his sternum. Expressionless and cold, the warrior quietly muttered that this time things would end differently, his unyielding strength and resolve deeply impressed the blood-stained Jack, who now found him to be a highly entertaining little guy, still refusing to yield. And furious, the performer spat back at him to stop talking nonsense and swung again. During the clash, he kept hurling wild insults at Su Lei, but thanks to his absolute focus, the hero ignored them. The enraged attacker kept missing his marks, as the agile fighter easily dodged every blow. Unbothered, Su Lei casually mentioned that he had figured out his pattern, so he could finish this with ease. Such extreme confidence drove Hua Jai mad, as he believed only he deserved to stand so tall. The silent fighter merely stared back without showing a single shred of emotion. Watching him unravel, the furious spectacled guy screamed, asking if landing a few lucky hits made him some god who could suddenly do anything. But then his weapon slipped as his hands froze completely, panic instantly washing over his face. Staring down, the terrified fighter desperately tried to understand why his fingers refused to move. The cold, ruthless warrior repeated that he had analyzed his opponent completely. Now we get a glimpse into how this tragic story actually began. Long ago, a simple patient wept as he thanked the doctor for restoring his precious mobility. This man felt overjoyed because the skilled healer had performed a literal miracle. Even though he had completely given up on ever being able to walk again, he deeply declared that he owed his entire future to this master. While a young boy stood nearby, watching in awe as he licked a lollipop. This kind, gentle father, Hua Jai, was a legendary doctor of traditional medicine. Naturally, to the little admiring boy, his father was an absolute hero, someone he desperately wanted to follow. But one dark day, a stranger with a megaphone began shouting that several patients had been left crippled after receiving treatment from a total fraud. A man heading to work saw a massive crowd quickly gathers, demanding to know what is going on. The lead protester shouts that they must report this to the authorities immediately, and then he suddenly spots the doctor standing aside. He immediately points at the confused man, loudly telling everyone that this is the very quack who has been mercilessly ruining lives. The mob leader begins accusing the doctor, who has a completely clear conscience and does not understand anything. A peaceful man trying to calm the tense situation keeps insisting that this is all just a massive misunderstanding. Standing nearby, Hua Jai's father spots one of the patients who visited him just recently. The doctor remembers clearly that he successfully cured the man's leg, so he can confidently speak up and prove that all of these horrible accusations are completely untrue. But within seconds, the patient's expression completely shifts in terror. Suddenly, a young man in a wheelchair rolls forward from the middle of the angry crowd, claiming he was left permanently paralyzed due to the doctor's medical mistake. The youth cries out that his legs were perfectly healthy before this terrible specialist intervened. Can you even imagine the crowd's utter disbelief at this revelation? They cannot believe such a fraud operates here, while young Hua Jai begins to fear deeply for his father. Soon, the clinic loses every patient and shuts down completely. His father's reputation is shattered, and no one is willing to listen anymore. Hundreds of millions in high-interest loans that had been taken out to open up the clinic are now completely impossible to pay back. The truly unbearable loss for him is the complete disappearance of his life purpose. Since he dedicated everything to his work, neighbors still continue to mock him until his broken father, on the verge of a breakdown, dies in a parking lot near the park at 40. He leaves his young son only a single note, confirming that his entire purpose was destroyed. By the time the young boy finally starts school, there is a completely different building standing in place of the old clinic. Years later, Huajai overhears two corrupt schemers laughing, admitting they only wanted to ruin the doctor's business, but things got out of hand. The primary culprit brags to his accomplice that without his specialized help, he could never have bought this massive high-rise at such an incredibly cheap price. He adds that the hired boy played the crippled role perfectly, mockingly asking if his guilty conscience is bothering him. The man tells him to forget about it and focus on joining their team, but Hua Jai is standing nearby, completely shattered by these words. That day, the young man brutally kills the person responsible for his father's death for the first time. Yet for some strange reason, the young man does not feel any relief from their deaths because it will not bring his beloved father back or fix his broken situation. Just then, the devastated youth discovers the diary left behind by his deceased father. Without thinking twice, he reaches for the notebook, realizing he can discover incredibly valuable information hidden inside. It holds every advanced medical technique and treatment his highly experienced father perfected throughout his lifetime. The thrilled boy realizes that with this he can finally prove his father was a genius. He begins robbing graves to practice, then experiments on the living for 2 years. In that moment, it actually took this miserable young man about 4 years to learn how to locate acupuncture points, and he was absolutely enraged that Su Li figured it out in no time flat. What had taken him years, our hero just scratched his temple and pointed out that his opponent talked too much. It was easy for him to quickly learn the entire human circulatory system and then press on those exact pressure points. Stunned, Jai could not believe it was that simple, but that was the obvious flaw of acupuncture. If you tried hard enough, it was not difficult to understand, but the bespectacled killer's helpless victims were never able to resist him, and he was absolutely sure that the secret of his technique would never be revealed. The discouraged young man could never imagine that someone would be able to fight back and completely shatter all his illusions, while our fearless hero just considered him an arrogant freak, so he unceremoniously kicked him in the head. The guy had absolutely no time to react and crashed heavily onto the floor as blood began to gush from his wound again. Jai-hee's head resting on the floor cheerfully noted that it was actually a pretty impressive move from the part of the brave fighter. Too easy. From the outside, it seemed like Su Li won easily, but in reality, he had to hone his skills day after day. The true greatness of this cold-blooded warrior was not just in his regeneration, and the killer understood that perfectly well, so our brash hero immediately grabbed the handle of his own sharp machete to finally finish what he had started. Terrified, Jai-hee begged his approaching opponent to stop, but no, Su Li did not listen and simply raised his blade, showing he was completely ready to deliver the final strike. The sweating performer told himself that he could not die so easily. Right then, an incredibly powerful blow came crashing down, which the heavily wounded Jai-hee was somehow able to blocked. The powerless Su Li instantly fell to his knees, feeling the pain, while his opponent was absolutely delighted that his cunning plan had actually worked. The sneaky opponent asked if the hero really thought victory would be on his side just because he lost both hands, smirking and adding that he had simply been distracted earlier and did not know our hero was baptized. His words were pure nonsense to the fighter lying on the floor, who glared viciously at his smug opponent. Grabbing the machete handle, the enraged warrior shouted out, asking if the scoundrel had decided to run away. That cold weapon was then pulled straight out of the deep wound, which immediately began to heal. Our hero ran at high speed from side to side, trying to find where that coward had gone. He looked around carefully, scanning every inch of the corridor, but every single spot was completely empty. Clutching his head, the brave fighter realized he had let the scoundrel escape, someone he needed to deal with immediately. In a rage, the frustrated fighter began to pound the wall, shouting out that the scoundrel was already in his hands but managed to slip away. Gone. Suddenly his gaze fell on the floor where he found a smartphone that could be an important clue. Calming down just a bit, Su Li realized the strange object could be extremely helpful to him and decided to take it. Meanwhile, inside one of the dark rooms, a mysterious stranger stared at something he thought was impossible. Looking at the body in front of him, the man wondered if this was some ridiculous bad joke. He refused to believe Jack was dead, but the cold remains lay right before him. A furious young man suddenly burst into the room, clearly enraged about something. Huajai, he stumbled in, shouting in rage. He screamed that he was completely set up and almost died trying to grab the body. He kept yelling that the bastard was baptized, and a classmate complicating this entire messy situation. The silent counterpart did not respond, only making the angry young man scream much louder. He complained that his nerves were shot before spotting Jack. Suddenly surprised, the furious young man asked if this dead body was some kind of rookie. He was instantly thrilled, needing a fresh dead body for his experiment. But the dark figure in the room had absolutely no intention of giving it up. Suddenly the kid froze up entirely as his eyes began to swell. Blood vessels ruptured in his eyes as a sharp blade drove straight through the helpless fool. The demon asked if he realized who he was disrespecting with his mouth. With a violent jerk, he ripped the weapon out, unleashing a massive, terrifying torrent of blood. The lifeless teen instantly collapsed to the floor, dead before hitting the ground. He never even realized what had hit him. Talk about cold-blooded. The killer calmly turned his gaze toward the computer desk. He clicked play on the construction site surveillance footage. He wanted to see exactly what had gone down over there. Clearly, the dead kid was talking about a baptized high schooler. This was a highly fascinating target, and the demon quickly understood everything. Red veins bulged in his angry eyes as he carefully studied every frame of the tape. Spotting a frame of Seiwu Li holding Jack's severed head, the psychopath instantly recognized his enemy. Meanwhile, the talking head instructed Seiwu Li to connect his phone. His bizarre assistant told him to open an anonymous browser and type in the specific address. A few quick clicks, and the secret connection was successfully made. Looking closely at the web page, the young man gasped. This was a secret digital playground for performers. The options were insane, offering classified job ads. There was market rankings and so much crazy stuff he did not know where to start. This was finally his perfect opportunity to uncover all of their deepest, darkest, and twisted secrets. But a moment later, his entire expression warped in shock. Oh man, whatever was on that screen absolutely broke him. Ripping himself away from the computer desk, the kid bolted straight for the dirty bathroom. Hearing him heave in the bathroom, Jack's head just laughed helplessly. He mockingly asked how his partner was holding up, but he did not get a reply. Seiwu Li was simply too busy gagging over the toilet. What Seiwu Li saw on that computer screen was something he desperately wanted to completely forget. Compared to this nightmare, standard murder news felt like harmless bedtime stories. A terrifying thought crept in, should he even keep digging into this horrible online app? Sure, he swore to kill the culprits, but the guilt was heavy. Deep down, taking lives made him feel absolutely disgusted. But reading the sick and twisted comments left by those horrible online monsters changed everything. The young fighter suddenly remembered a vital clue he had overlooked. Those performers were not human. Taking them out was doing everyone a huge favor. The hero pressed the drain button with his knife. Time to go back. Returning to the room, Jack immediately asked how he was holding up. The severed head looked surprisingly lively. A faint, creepy little grin remained on it. Curious, Su Li asked about the locked options. What did they actually mean? Jack explained that the guy owning this device was not the actual perpetrator. The kid did not quite understand. It made no sense to him. This phone was just an access tool. Most features were heavily restricted. Clearly, Huichi was just a low-level intern, not a full member yet. Su Li silently agreed. The kid never claimed to be a real operative anyway. Still, how was Jack so incredibly sure? Su Li demanded an explanation. Jack laughed. To him, the truth was completely obvious. He pointed out that the kid never used force. Su Li brought up his needles. Su Li quickly reminded the killer of that weird acupuncture technique. Jack dismissed it. Anyone could learn that with enough persistent training. However, our hero's self-healing was a completely different matter. That regeneration was a unique skill possessed only by the highly gifted. If a real performer owned this phone, they could use it without limits. But Suli was not that lucky. Still, the pieces were coming together. The puzzle clicked, then a new notification suddenly popped up. He instantly grabbed the mouse to open the forum and check the update. Shock within seconds, his face became completely blank with utter confusion. Behind him, Jack just giggled. A shocking post had just gone live. The serial killer was dead. Worse, the prime suspect was an unknown high schooler. Jack laughed, wondering how much attention the panicked young man would get now. He had officially painted a massive, glowing target right on his back. Meanwhile, on a bright day, nervous Sun-hoon stood on the street hiding his face. He kept his hood pulled low. Where was Hueji? What was happening? Terrified, he ran inside the police station, screaming for immediate help. The boy cried that a monster knocked him out and experimented on corpses. The desk officer asked if his hands were really bound with tape. Sun-hoon frantically nodded, desperately trying to make the skeptical cop understand. So how did he escape? That question completely threw the kid off. He started panicking. Sun-hoon nervously tried to explain the situation once more. When he woke up, the room was empty and the tape had torn. The cop just smirked. He did not believe a single word. He wanted this annoying kid out of his station as fast as possible. "Get out," the officer yelled to save the jokes for his friends. He called over Officer Kwon, demanding to have this loud kid removed. A burly officer grabbed the boy, immediately starting to drag him away. Sun-hoon kept screaming, but the sight of the giant officer made him freeze. He shut his mouth. The terrifying guard looked absolutely massive up close. He weakly muttered a complaint about police brutality as they threw him out. Left alone, Sun-hoon was shivering with fear, having absolutely no idea what to do. Suddenly, Sanju appeared right behind him. The kid froze in pure terror. He almost faints from terror. His confused little sister asks why he is skipping school. And hanging around here instead, the annoyed boy snaps back, asking why she is sneaking up. On him, she quickly realizes he is not only skipping class, but hiding. From everyone, the girl wants to talk about Wajahi because she cannot reach him on his phone. The angry blonde boy instantly yells out, demanding to know why she is even talking to some nerd, shocking her. Shoving the boy away, the irritated brunette demands to know what he is doing. Sending him stumbling backward toward the dirt, a very upset Sanju then reveals that the boy left a sudden note in the student council room, claiming he is transferring to another school. She adds that she does not care, even though her friend completely cut off all contact since yesterday. Tense and anxious, Hong wonders if this was all the glass-wearing guy's master plan and he just chose to run, but at least he can finally have some peace and quiet, though his thoughts are cut short. Something nearby catches his attention. He spots a familiar face. A perfectly calm Suli, walking to school with his backpack on. The blonde boy feels immense relief, knowing the main character is safe and sound. Shortly after, a young man wearing a sharp formal suit steps into an empty classroom where nobody has taken their seats yet, just as expected. The kid with the glasses is nowhere to be found, which does not surprise anyone since he is a total coward. Suddenly, the strict teacher commands all of the students to take their designated seats so they can finally begin the morning lesson. He announces that their regular homeroom teacher went on vacation, so a replacement is taking over. A highly sudden change. The students find it incredibly bizarre. But Suli, sitting in the very back, has far bigger things on his mind right now. Suddenly, a handsome gentleman steps through the door and stands before the shocked class. The poised new instructor confidently walks forward with steady, measured steps. He politely says that he is thrilled to meet them, and the girls immediately swoon over his incredible good looks and tall build. Saitehen confidently introduces himself as their official new homeroom teacher. Hold on, why does this new guy look so incredibly familiar to him? They must have met before. The brown-eyed teacher suddenly turns his gaze, flashes a very polite and highly charming smile, expressing his genuine hope that they will all get along well together. But Suli grows highly suspicious, his expression instantly tightening. Something about this guy feels completely off, just for a split second. It feels like the teacher is smiling directly at him. The brown-eyed instructor keeps staring with that eerie, pleasant grin, but his actual motives remain completely hidden. Meanwhile, inside a locked room somewhere in the city, an old man gasps for breath, entirely at the mercy of a brutal attacker. The figure in black shows absolutely no mercy to his victim. Unwilling to let him live, he raises his fist to strike one final time. At that exact second, a heavy strike slams directly into the old man's collarbone. He gasps in agonizing pain, and just seconds later, his eyes start rolling back. It is the end of his life. The ruthless killer simply shoves the body aside. He slowly stands up, fully aware that his dark job is finally complete. A wicked grin spreads across his face as quiet returns to the room. The next morning at school, several girls whisper about a third body being found. 3 deaths in 1 week, though one classmate acts like it is no big deal. It is deeply unsettling. Neighbors do not just die off like that. There is no way people are just dying back to back. Overhearing this, he listens closely. The always calm Suli keeps quiet, processing everything in his head. Keeping his voice down, he mutters a question to Jack, whose head remains hidden. Right inside his school backpack. Suli asks what he makes of these deaths, wondering if the killer is actually some professional. His strange backpack partner takes a moment to carefully consider his reply. Jack mockingly notes that if hitmen were friendly, anyone could do it. Jack then questions if the young man is being way too paranoid here. But Suli explains he is not talking about their new homeroom teacher. This is about a bizarre incident, and he must stay controlled. The stressed teen keeps repeating to himself that he must keep things under control. He asks Jack if the heart attack victims could actually be targets. He reminds the entity that posting that online message basically started a game. Jack just sneers back, saying his fans are capable of much worse things. As for these creepy incidents and the hidden maniac, the guy does not care. He acts completely indifferent and sarcastic, which only increases the tension. Honestly, you can't blame our hero for getting more and more frustrated here. Enraged, Suli clenches his fist, desperately wanting to smash this idiot's head in. This jerk is seriously testing his patience. Suddenly, he starts taking it out on his backpack. He aggressively beats the bag, showing his absolute fury toward the clueless Jack. Gritting his teeth, he mutters angry insults, immediately drawing some very strange looks. His classmates watch in shock, convinced the new kid has totally lost his mind. He completely lost his sanity. But then he remembers they are not alone. Others whisper about his weird behavior. They talk about how he always sits in the back, muttering to himself. Hearing this makes him incredibly embarrassed. Now, shifting back to the mysterious deaths. Heart failures happen for many reasons, but this looks like supernatural intervention. Jack asks if it is really worth overthinking this, since the truth will emerge. The answers will present themselves eventually. He tells him to just relax. Exhausted, Suli asks what other options he has, so Jack offers a new idea. He suggests they head straight to the crime scene to search for physical clues. By late evening, the brave teen sneaks inside the dark room of the victim. He stands directly inside the room where the old gentleman had his fatal heart attack. But things here feel incredibly off. Our sharp protagonist is convinced of foul play. There are subtle signs of a struggle scattered all over the messy room. Speaking quietly from the bag, Jack points out it looks like a typical shack. A messy place where the owner hated cleaning. But the hero is in no mood for his nonsense, though death was officially ruled. A heart attack, the young fighter sees obvious signs of a struggle. This is no ordinary poisoning. Suli is absolutely convinced that some shadow figure is pulling the strings. And if he is right, this killer has some seriously dangerous special skills. Or a deadly weapon. Just then, a glint of light on the floor catches his eye. He leans down, determined to find out what strange object is hidden there. Reaching out a cautious hand, he stays on high alert. Suddenly, the fighter glances toward the window. He senses someone or something creeping up from behind him. But it is just the wail of police sirens echoing from down the street. A tense Suli immediately rushes over to peer outside. He needs to know if the danger is coming for him right now. Down below, 2 police cars are parked with their lights flashing brightly. The shocked young fighter stands frozen. He cannot believe another murder happened. Jack nervously asks if something is wrong. Meanwhile, at the student council, a furious Sanju slams her hands on the table, yelling at her silent peers. People are literally dying, but nobody else seems to understand. She insists that the school desperately needs their protection right now. Sanju demands they organize a 2-hour nightly patrol immediately. If they do nothing, things will only get much worse. An arrogant student scoffs, "Where are these supposedly terrified kids?" The headmaster coldly claims those deaths were just bad luck. His total indifference drives the brown-eyed girl insane with rage. How can he say that when the latest victim was a perfectly healthy high schooler? On top of that, witnesses saw a suspicious man fleeing the scene. But the arrogant boy shrugs it off since nothing is officially confirmed. He warns her not to make things complicated over simple rumors. Just then, teacher Saitihan walks in and actually supports the patrol. Since several students requested it, he thinks it is a solid plan. It would serve as their final volunteer opportunity of the month. The headmaster glares in disapproval, but the polite teacher keeps his cool. He makes it clear that the patrol is completely voluntary. However, anyone who skips out will lose their monthly school points. That is a pretty major detail for them to consider. When he asks if anyone objects, a relieved Sanju flashes a smile. She knows he just saved her plan. Meanwhile, in a dark, empty factory, a shadowy figure is lurking quietly, keeping well out of sight. The cold-blooded killer sits alone, plotting his next move. Suddenly, his phone buzzes with a brand new notification. He checks it instantly. The screen reads that the barcode is confirmed. All information on Jack's killer has been successfully delivered. This is exactly what the dark figure had been waiting to hear. Closing his eyes, the cold killer murmurs that everything is playing out perfectly. Meanwhile, the student council heads out. Starting their evening patrol, they throw on those light green vests. Their tense group leader insists they are perfectly safe. This makes Sanju laugh, while her aloof partner complains that they are just wasting their time, but then he acts strange. He claims he has to run to the restroom, asking her to keep patrolling alone. She is definitely not comfortable with that, but he shrugs it off. He tells her not to worry, yet she reminds him they must stick together. Despite all her protests, the poor girl is left entirely on her own. Standing there with hands on her hips, she realizes she is completely lost. Then she shivers, realizing she is right next to the recent crime scene. Suddenly, a nervous voice echoes nearby, insisting he cannot help. Curious about this conversation, Sanju decides to follow the sound. She creeps closer to investigate, only to spot the new kid, Su-lei. He is arguing with a man, claiming some item is incredibly valuable. She recognizes him immediately as the quiet new kid from her class. But as she watches them, a creepy hand creeps up behind her. A shadow looms over her, reaching out slowly from the dark. He is about to snatch her by the hair while she is distracted. Meanwhile, Su-Li promises the man this will only take a minute. But the man is stubborn, repeatedly saying no, making Su-Li demand answers. Annoyed by the persistent kid, the guard finally decides to explain the situation. He pulls out a police badge, revealing he is actually an undercover cop. The cop explains that a major incident occurred here just yesterday. The active police tape proves this was no simple accident. Su-Li realizes this immediately, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. The officer warns the kid to back off, but then his phone rings. He quickly answers, reporting to his chief about a suspicious kid loitering. His priority is to cordon off the entire block right now. But when the officer turns around, he spots the red-haired boy again. He grabs Su-Li by the shoulder, calling him an annoying little punk. The angry cop barks, demanding to know where he thinks he is going. He yells that this area is restricted, but the kid stays calm. Su-Li simply nods, acting incredibly suspicious as he turns around. He casually says he will just leave, which only makes the cop more suspicious. But get this, a mysterious figure creeps up right behind the distracted Park Sun-jun. A hand gently taps her shoulder, making her jump in fear. But relief washes over her when she sees it is only teacher Saitihan. He asks where Minwoo went, warning her that they must stick together. She explains that her partner ran off to find a nearby restroom. Yet the teacher frowns, saying he just came from there and saw nobody. Confused, the girl suggests he might have used a different one. Then she looks over, realizing the new classmate has vanished into thin air. He was standing right there just a couple of minutes ago. Now there is absolutely no sign of him, which feels incredibly strange. The teacher remains dead silent, staring into the dark alleyways ahead. A dark silhouette peeked out from behind a nearby bush, keeping a watchful eye on them. Sensing the danger of being spotted, the shadowy demon immediately prepared to retreat. It vanished instantly, leaving only the quiet rustle of leaves. The cool-headed man knew he saw something weird, but he kept his poker face on. Choosing to stay quiet, he calmly announced that their evening patrol was officially over. The startled Park Sun-jun stood there completely clueless about what was actually happening. Su-lee realized he had dragged the poor kid into this mess for absolutely nothing. He decided to try the police station again while sending the exhausted student back home. Later that night, a tired Su-lee lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Resting nearby, Jack's head on a plastic mannequin spoke up to praise his performance. The killer admired how the young man kept his cool under pressure. Su-lee asked what he meant, but the sarcastic psycho chuckled at his clueless act. The crazy killer pointed out what happened back in the park. When the cop pushed him away, the guy deftly hopped back and stepped on the evidence. That quick thinking and sharp reaction earned him some major respect from the killer. Not many people could pull off a slick move like that under pressure. The long-haired psycho watched the whole thing, but Su-lee kept his face completely blank. Even so, Su-lee knew the killer made a good point about the situation. This was not the first time he had found a weird metal fragment at a crime scene. The young fighter started connecting the dots, mentally retracing all his past investigations. He now had 3 of these small metal shards, but their purpose remained a mystery. No matter how hard he stared at them, he could not figure out what they did. Talk about a mystery. Pointing out the killer's sharp instincts, Su-lee asked if he had any real leads. Jack admitted he had one theory, but first he wanted to ask a deep question. He asked if the most crucial thing for a hero was always moving forward. For a vain guy like Jack, nothing mattered more than his precious, beautiful hair. Su-lee stared blankly, wondering what kind of ridiculous nonsense his weird ally was spewing. The killer just could not keep a straight face or act serious for 1 second. Su-lee told him to spit it out, but Jack just asked about hair care instead. He argued that a healthy scalp is vital for great hair. As the psycho droned on about dead skin cells, Su-lee tried not to snap. He begged the hero to get to the point, but Jack demanded a shower first. The crazy head complained that he had not been washed even once since their reunion. "Wash me," Jack promised, "and I will tell you exactly what those metal shards are." Classic blackmail. The exhausted kid held his temple, wondering why he had to deal with this idiot. He had no choice but to give in to the killer. Grabbing Jack's head by the greasy hair, he agreed to clean him up. Oh, he did. Moments later, Su-lee walked into the bathroom, ready to get the job done. Jack sensed something was off, but before he could react, he was tossed forward. Straight into the washing machine, not the spa day he wanted. With zero hesitation, Su-lee aggressively dialed in the heavy wash cycle. He pressed start, unleashing a wave of loud, dizzy screams. On a sunny day, Song-hong and his crew were smoking behind one of the school buildings. They were talking business when the brunette mentioned that Shi-lee had finally returned to school, making the heavy kid ask if he had snitched. He replied that the kid surely knew to keep quiet. The anxious blonde agreed with him, although he was deeply alarmed. The kid with the bandaged nose felt uneasy because the newcomer was alive. But Hua-jai had completely vanished. It just did not make sense. Both of them were supposed to die, yet one of them somehow survived. He just could not understand how, while his friends kept talking. Then the brunette went totally quiet, as if he just spotted something interesting. A short distance away, Shi-lee was walking calmly to school. The punks laughed because he did not even glance their way. But Song-hong, he was deeply unsettled. This was completely unlike him. A friend asked where their boss was heading. He replied that he had business to handle and would see them later. The tense blonde figured Shi-lee knew exactly what happened at the factory. He had to know the truth about that night. A few moments later, a perfectly calm Shi-lee stopped. He stood there lost in thought. Suddenly, a voice called from behind. He spun around to find Song-hong staring him down. But that silly band-aid on his nose completely ruined the tough guy act. The bully asked if he had a second for a serious talk. Our quiet hero flat out told him he was not interested. The bully got furious and brought up the abandoned factory. He demanded to know exactly what occurred when they met at the warehouse. He grabbed the silent student roughly by the shoulder. Song-hong yelled out that he asked a question, but Shi-lee did not care. The fearless fighter turned around sharply, done being polite. His icy glare instantly made the bully's blood run cold. He calmly repeated his warning to get lost, and trust me, he meant it. Instantly, the blonde bully was tripped and stumbled backward. He crashed straight onto his back, while Shi remained standing strong. He acted like nothing happened, his composure completely unshaken. Song Hong's fists clenched tightly, and he almost lost it right there. Somehow he managed to hold back, spitting out insults instead. He called him a stubborn bastard who refused to share secrets. Is the red-haired kid hiding something and refusing to tell? But Song Hong had too much pride to keep begging for answers. He swore he would find out everything on his own. Late that night, the blonde bully nervously returned to the creepy abandoned factory. He was absolutely terrified, constantly feeling like someone was following him. Cold shivers ran down his spine, forcing him to pause and breathe. Slapping his own cheeks, the blonde yelled at himself to pull it together. He needed to be brave because there was absolutely nothing here. After all, he was the proud leader of the Beak Ho School. But suddenly, a man gripping a cold weapon sneaks up. The bully stands frozen, completely caught off guard by the silent approach. A heavy iron bar crashes directly into his spine with brutal force. Jack's head hangs right beside the cold sink. He demands to know if Shi is at the spot. The young man explains that the location is just an ordinary gym. At first, he figured he had stupidly fallen for a killer's lies. He carefully scans every single detail around him to avoid any mistakes. Glancing back at the piece of steel, the truth finally hits him. The obvious answer was staring him right in the face. Standing before a heavy red door locked with thick chains, he hesitates. Broken chain links lay scattered on the ground from some rough action. A mysterious stranger walks up and nudges the body with his boot. Song-hoon lies completely motionless on the hard ground, totally knocked out. The man is shocked that a tough Beak Ho High student fell so easily, especially since the loud kid always acted like he was completely untouchable. Da Vinci, the infamous flaming Mona Lisa, chuckles at the sight. He asks the crew if they agree that victory feels absolutely amazing. Laughing loudly, he mocks them for bringing useless chains to a real fight. Suddenly, the blonde kid pushes himself up, grumbling about a massive headache. One punk mentions hearing that the new kid took a severe beating. The furious bully demands to know if they were the ones responsible. He spits out insults, calling them pathetic idiots from Beak Ho High. The 10th grade captain is just glad his target woke up so soon. It would be way too boring if the kid died this quickly, after all. Da Vinci brings up their unfinished business, but the tense teen plays dumb. The bully sneers, asking if that bald punk just called him weak. Scoffing, the bald guy just laughs it off, claiming it was all a joke. With a terrifying glare, the captain asks if the kid has lost his mind. He wants to know if the brat has completely forgotten how to fear them. The punk wonders if the blonde-haired Song-hoon truly understands his situation. Song-hoon silently scans the room and begins sizing up his opponents. He spots one chain, 2 heavy clubs, and some unarmed grunts. The distance is short, giving him a tight window to make a move. Standing his ground, the young fighter realizes he must strike the weakest first. Without warning, he charges directly at the kid wearing the yellow jacket. The target freezes, completely stunned by the explosive and sudden assault. Song-hoon drives a brutal elbow straight into the guy's jaw. A perfect strike, but another quick fighter sneaks up behind him, ready to strike back. A merciless blow drives straight into the center of his spine. Pain flares, but Song-hoon grits his teeth and refuses to fall. Fueled by pure rage, the young warrior lunges directly at his attacker. He wraps his arms around the guy's torso, slamming him downward. Pinning his rival to the ground, he uses his weight to lock him. He pulls himself up to continue the fight, throwing punch after heavy punch. His clenched fists show his iron-willed character, leaving Da Vinci stunned. The bully captain cannot believe a mere kid wiped out his entire crew so fast. His partner is ready to jump in, but the 10th grade captain raises his hand. He stops his ally, claiming there is no need since everything is under control. The brutal fighter asks if they are really not going to clash. The leader points out the kid is completely lost. He got confused because he does not know anything about them. Smirking, Da Vinci says they did not come here to fight, making things simple. It is much simpler than that. Calling his ally, he asks if they found her. His confused partner is completely lost. One of the thugs chimes in, reporting that they already have Park Sun-jun. Song-hoon's sister is locked down with them, and they are on their way. That familiar female voice instantly makes the young fighter freeze in place. His whole world turns upside down as his heart begins to race with terror. Furious, Song-hoon snaps and calls Da Vinci a shameless bastard, but the bully laughs. He just laughs at the outburst. Smirking, the punk promises not to touch his sister. She will just hang out with them for a bit, a harmless guest. If Song-hoon wants her safe, he needs to play nice, though Hoon is furious. He wants to tear him apart. Meanwhile, Shi-Li visits a local hardware shop. He meets a plain-looking shopkeeper, deciding to show him a broken piece of chain. The owner asks if he has checked another place. He suggests visiting Mr. Cho's shop upstairs, but the young man shook his head. That did not help. Shi-Li guesses someone might have bought a similar chain. Perhaps a different size entirely, but their conversation is suddenly interrupted. The owner asks a worker if the job is finally done. The serious repairman nods, saying it only took him a couple of minutes to finish. The shopkeeper feels a bit embarrassed for not fixing the broken lock himself. The locksmith asks for cash payment, and the owner hands it over without issue. Shi-Li silently watches the exchange, keeping his eyes on the locksmith. The technician seems highly suspicious, quickly brushing past him toward the exit. The shop owner sighs, turning back to ask what they were discussing earlier. He had forgotten. Meanwhile, in an old factory, a grim scene unfolds. A defenseless Song-hoon is getting brutally beaten down by the merciless Da Vinci. The thug mockingly tells him to grit his teeth tightly. Because he keeps striking his jaw. He pummels the blonde youth mercilessly, refusing to give him even a second to breathe. Smirking, Da Vinci asks him how it feels to taste absolute defeat. He mocks his own heavy fists, but the gang leader wants more amusement. He wants to take things further, and nobody knows what sick game is next. A moment later, a wicked idea pops into his bald head. The brute declares that from now on, the battered kid will be his personal errand boy. A brutal demand, the 10th grade captain promises a way out. If Song-hoon agrees to submit, he will let his sister walk away untouched. Left with no choice, the beaten youth reluctantly agrees, pleasing the bully. That sarcastic scoundrel laughed, boasting that he really should have targeted 2 high schoolers now that Hong was handling the dirty work. The bloodstained blonde pushed himself up, asking if he heard that correctly. About the students, the punk grinned and said he was doing great. Dealing with them, but his beaten opponent only burst out laughing, clutching his face. Song started laughing even louder than before. The bewildered bully demanded to know what was so funny. Da-hoon was completely annoyed by the attitude, grabbing the young fighter by his collar and threatening another brutal beating, but the fearless kid suddenly tripped him up. Sending him crashing face first, he slammed his chin on the dirt and nearly shattered a couple of teeth, which looked painful but mostly made him absolutely furious. Now the serious son Hong showed his true colors and clear readiness to take these fools down. Another thug grabbed a steel rod. With a tight grip, desperate for payback, but brace yourselves because right then the kid took a massive slap. It left his vision spinning, nearly knocking him completely out. A dazed Da Vinci didn't even realize what hit him. Before another brutal strike caught his ugly face, breaking his crooked nose. The balding thug crashed hard, wiping the blood from his face while he warned the fair-haired youngster that they knew exactly where his sister was. The cold-blooded fighter scoffed, knowing they did not have the guts to touch her. The enraged captain of the Davun school roared that he would never let himself be humiliated by anyone. He quickly punched a number into his phone and threatened that the kid would deeply regret messing with them. But those empty threats only made him laugh. The tense punk wondered why his partner was not answering when he needed him most, taking his chance. The ruthless son Hong drove his elbow hard into the guy's collarbone, shattering his stance. This instantly knocked the phone away. With a terrifying smile, the fighter told him that before picking a fight, he should have done some basic research. He pointed out that Da Vinci's highly praised backup goons were already lying unconscious. The confident fighter was completely right. Because his sister Park Sun-jun had easily handled the 2 thugs, the girl was the top judo star at school, and even he used to get thrashed by her. When they were kids, suddenly, the relentless fighter grabbed his rival and pulled him close, catching him off guard, executing a perfect hip throw. The young man boasted that he learned this clean move straight from his sister. The stunned gang leader lay flat on the floor, gasping for air. He was unable to believe he just got defeated so easily. A bloody son Hong looked down coldly, deciding not to waste another second inside the factory. Limping down the dark street, the exhausted and battered young man dragged his feet forward, refusing to quit because resting did not help at all, leaning against a cold brick wall to fight the sudden dizziness. His phone began to ring. Pulling out the screen, the blonde saw that it was none other than his worried sister calling him. Without a second thought, the young man answered to check on her, only to hear a chilling, unfamiliar male voice. He demands to know his name. The mysterious caller just claims he needs the young man to do a favor. Alarm bells ring. Out of pure rage, Hong screams into the phone, demanding to know who this freak is using Park Sun-joon's cell. The shadow on the other end tells him not to worry, assuring him that the girl is perfectly fine. She is alive and well for now, he says. But at that very moment, the poor girl is tied to a chair from head to toe. Hong snaps. He begins furiously threatening the bastard who dared to kidnap his sister and hold her hostage. His face contorts with pure rage, but his body suddenly gives out. Those deep wounds are taking their toll. Having lost a terrifying amount of blood, the young man is running on empty. And slipping out of consciousness, the cold killer demands that he must show up at the meeting spot alone if he wants his sister to stay alive. But there is zero response. He strains his ears in the dead silence. But the line is dead. The bastard assumes the brother simply does not care about his sister, completely unaware that Hong has collapsed on the cold ground. Totally unconscious, the villain is just about to hang up the phone when another hand suddenly snatches the cell. Stop right there. Shu Li has just found Hong bleeding out on the pavement and demands the location from the caller. This legendary fighter promises to track down and destroy the scum who took innocent Park Sun-joon. Meanwhile, the terrified girl is trapped in total darkness, her eyes covered by a thick mask, no clue where she is. First things first, she tries to slip her hands free, carefully twisting against her tight bindings to loosen the rope, but her captor notices. He acts fast. He grabs her wrists tightly to shut her escape attempt down. With a cold, soulless look, he tells her to stay still because he would hate to kill her. He explains that he promised not to hurt her yet, so she needs to stay calm. But then, the rugged kidnapper realizes he is talking to a brick wall. He reaches over and brushes the hair away from Park Sun-joon's ear. Wait, unbelievable. The girl is wearing earplugs. She cannot hear a single word coming from this cold-blooded killer. The villain is just about to say something else to his helpless captive, but suddenly he freezes. Something is seriously wrong. He hears strange noises. They are coming from the front door. Someone is here, and sure enough, a completely fearless hero stands at the entrance, ready to fight and save her. The killer asks who he is, but the young man silently clenches his fists. He is ready to fight. The kidnapper repeats his question, but our hero stays quiet and scans the room, carefully calculating every single move. After a few incredibly tense seconds, Shu Li realizes that this face actually looks pretty familiar to him. It hits him. This is the lock repairman from the hardware store. He asks him straight up if he is the criminal, catching the kidnapper completely off guard, not getting an immediate reply. The furious fighter demands to know if he is responsible for the heart attacks. The culprit mocks his rude tone, but proudly confesses that he is indeed the one. This kind of activity was his job, but then the stern bandit points out the boy has not answered his actual question, despite asking one of his own. The villain asks in a booming voice who this daredevil is and what he wants here, since he was expecting someone else entirely. The villain stares down coldly at the youngster, who dares to trespass on his territory and waste his precious time. His terrifying, icy gaze is deeply unsettling to the young hero, who struggles to keep his outward composure steady and not show any hint of fear. The brave young man reminds him of his promise on the phone that he would show up, catching the bandit completely off guard for a second. Pointing to himself, the young man confirms he is the one the killer spoke to earlier on the phone. The bitter hitman snaps that this is impossible, since he specifically dialed the older brother of the captive girl. The quick-thinking Shu Li instantly realizes that Song Hoon's little sister has fallen straight into the brutal clutches of this criminal. The young hero explains that his friend was busy, so he took the call himself and sees absolutely nothing wrong with that. The furious killer replies that he needs the blonde guy with whom he has some major unfinished business. The gangster threatens to end Park Sun-joon if the kid does not tell his friend that he is waiting. Heavy tears begin to stream from the blindfolded brunette's eyes, who still cannot see a single thing. Seeing her terror, the young hero realizes that to save Hoon's sister, he has to bring his friend, but there is no guarantee that the thug will ever let her go. He calmly asks what happens if he simply refuses to cooperate with these ruthless demands. The killer cold-bloodedly replies that in that case, he will execute the girl right now, which instantly puts the young hero on high alert. In a split second, the killer catches a strange rustle behind him and immediately spins around to investigate the noise. This is the moment the fearless warrior strikes first to keep the thug off guard and save the hostage. The thug spots the bag flying toward him and laughs off the desperate stupid move, but even though he thinks it is foolish, he still drops his guard for just a fraction of a second. That is all the hero needs. He finds a vulnerable gap and unleashes a brutal kick, sending the bandit flying like a soccer ball, absolute crushing force. The villain catches himself mid-slide, slamming his hand onto the concrete floor, screaming that the brat is dead meat, but the hero's fist is already aiming right at his face before the killer can even scramble back up. The relentless attacker does not let up, throwing another strike, but his opponent manages to dodge just in time. Suddenly, the brave Shu Lei feels an excruciating pain rip through his ribs, barely registering when or how the enemy landed the blow. He flies backward across the room, but keeps his grip on consciousness, ready to fight. The killer warns him to stay out of this, wanting to avoid throwing away any more lives, but the fighter asks if he thinks the other lives were necessary, and the thug replies that it was just collateral damage. This is the only way he can flush out that blonde-haired fool, Park Sun-hoon, but the fearless Lee refuses to. Su Lee asks point-blank why he is so desperate to meet the blonde man. The mercenary replies that the hottest rumor among players is about the past, specifically the return of killer Jack 10 years ago. Rumor has it Jack kept talking about a certain newcomer, the very guy who ended him, who happens to be Park Sun-jun's brother. Hearing this, Su Lee is completely baffled by the nonsense. After all, he was the one who personally finished off that psycho. Yet the mercenary does not seem to be lying at all. He has no reason to. The mercenary warns Su Lee not to play dumb. He claims to have solid proof, prompting Su Lee to ask where he got it. He pulled it straight from a security camera inside an abandoned factory. This instantly sets off alarm bells for Su Lee as the villain continues. He saw Sun Hong Jack entering the facility on that very security tape. Su Lee tried not to draw any attention to himself tonight, but he never could have guessed the dangerous path this would lead him down. Still, the mercenary's obvious ignorance might actually work in his favor. Acting casual, Su Lee asks what the mercenary plans to do next. Specifically, what his plans are once the blonde kid actually shows up. The bearded fighter grins, stating they will fight to see who is stronger. Clenching his fists, Su Lee calmly asks why they even need the kid then. With a sudden burst of speed, the battle-hungry mercenary lunges forward. He roars that he will crush the foolish executor himself. He swings a heavy chain weapon, perfect for keeping his distance. The mercenary excels at mid-range combat, forcing Su Lee to adapt. To survive this, Su Lee needs to close the distance as quickly as possible. He has to strike up close to catch the mercenary completely off guard. Su Lee moves with blinding speed, executing a flawless, lightning-fast advance. He closes in, but the mercenary effortlessly blocks his opening strike. Realizing he needs more power, Su Lee switches up his approach. He fires a heavy uppercut, but the man slips it easily. Su Lee freezes for a split second, stunned by the speed. He had put everything into that strike, and it yielded absolutely nothing. He forces himself to keep moving to avoid becoming an easy target. Even his signature heel kick is shut down without effort. It is a terrible sign, especially when the mercenary catches his leg. Grabbing him by the shin, the brute growls about his annoyance. Without another word, he prepares to teach the kid a lesson. He twists his entire frame and hurls Su Lee to the ground. Gasping for air, Su Lee lies sprawled out on the cold floor. He blinks his eyes open, trying to process the sudden impact. His expression instantly shifts as he looks up at the shadow looming over him. The ruthless mercenary stands above him, glaring down with pure malice. He violently yanks Su Lee up by his collar, dead set on finishing this. There is no hesitation in his eyes, only absolute intent to destroy. He prepares to execute another brutal, bone-shattering throw. Impressive speed, catching the hero completely off guard before he can even think or understand what is happening. Suddenly, the young man's nose slams hard into the floor, which is incredibly painful and unpleasant, but he has no choice but to endure the impact. For the first few seconds, the unconscious hero does not move, showing absolutely no signs of life, which is exactly what the killer wanted. As if nothing even happened, the killer turns and starts to walk away, refusing to waste any more time on him. But then, the villain suddenly hears a voice behind him. Su Li calmly complains that it hurts. Stretching his limbs, the resilient young man asks for a little time to recover, utterly baffling the enemy who just broke his neck. The determined Su Li does not waste any more time talking and immediately rushes right back into battle, hungry for revenge. Once again, he forces his way close to the killer to knock him down and lock him in place, but the assassin is no pushover, easily catching Su Li by the neck and calling him nimble, which deeply annoys the killer locks him in a brutal chokehold with no escape. Raising the stakes to a dangerous new level, the struggling fighter tells himself he must break free before he completely blacks out from a lack of oxygen. Suddenly, the brutal villain snaps Su Li's neck a second time, who is entirely helpless to stop him. Right then, the limp boy collapses onto the cold floor. Again, and surely he is finished. This time, the killer clearly heard the bones snap and is fully confident the kid is dead, but seconds later, his confident expression shatters and his pupils suddenly shrink. Talk about a terrifying recovery. Like it was nothing, Su Li stands right back up, calmly stating he cannot be killed that easily, staring coldly at his shocked opponent. The young hero promises to finish this fight once and for all. The assassin apologizes, admitting he has only been fighting normal people lately. Never expected that this kid would be something entirely different. Now that Su Li has shown his worth, the killer feels he must match that intensity, but the battered Su Li cannot keep this up. And if the killer unleashes those chains, there is absolutely no way to win. He knows he has to end this instantly, but right then he freezes. Sudden doubt washes over him. Meanwhile, the perfectly calm, unbothered gentleman announces he is ready, showing absolute composure. The unshaven killer explains that this specific weapon is his real strength, making him virtually invincible. The speechless hero stares in utter disbelief, silently questioning if this strange item is truly his weapon. What really confuses him is that the killer holds nothing but a simple shiny padlock. Wait, a lock, that is it. The surprised young man tries to figure out why this random object is here. He clearly remembers that shattered chain links were discovered at the active crime scene, so the pieces simply do not fit together. Su Li pulls a small metal shard from his pocket, silently inspecting it to make sense of the mystery. Then it suddenly hits him. During that heavy strike, a small piece of the lock shackle must have broken off and flown into the dirt. The sharp hero senses his opponent is holding back, refusing to reveal his true tricks just yet. The killer says nothing about chains, yet the padlock he holds obviously plays a major part in this dark puzzle. Suddenly, everything starts to click. The sharp-eyed fighter realized his opponent had locked the chains with a shiny object. A glinting lock. His massive opponent smiled. The kid looked thrilled for a simple locksmith holding a lock. Clenching his massive fist, the giant told him there was no need to worry. Stay focused. Su Li knew he couldn't let his guard slip now. He gripped his lock tightly. It was his only source of real strength. One mistake, it would cost him his life against this brutal brawler. The giant swung his arms like heavy clubs, trying to catch the boy. Each strike whistled through the air, carrying enough force to shatter bone. But the kid was too quick. Su Li slipped under the heavy blows with ease. The giant was heavy and predictable, making it easy to block with the iron lock. Then in a split second, the young fighter realized he was cornered. Trap closed, he had no idea how the brute cut off his escape. With his back to the wall, Su Li had to act fast. The giant unleashed a flurry of brutal punches, desperate to crush him. Heavy fists rained down like a collapsing stone wall. The impact rattled his bones, but Su Li barely held his ground. Suddenly, the young warrior gasped as his eyes went wide. Something was completely wrong. The lock in his hand had vanished. The lock had vanished into thin air. How did he even pull that off? The cornered youth had no idea. Su Li shoved the giant back and leaped away to create distance. A terrible feeling washed over him as the killer flashed a wicked grin. The man told him to look closer for that shiny object. He pointed directly at Su Li's left arm, leaving him speechless. Panic set in as Su Li realized the heavy lock was fused inside his arm. The killer bragged that he could phase his locks into any living target. This was his contract power, a terrifying ability to bypass physical armor. If that lock snapped shut inside his flesh, Su Li would be done for. He flexed his fingers and felt the cold iron shifting under his skin. Calm down, he had to focus before the killer struck again. With a deep breath, the young locksmith lunged forward once more. He feigned a heavy punch with his right fist to distract the man. While the giant blocked, Su Li channeled all his power into his left. The trap was set perfectly, but he kept his emotions in check. Yet the cold-blooded killer casually stepped aside, dodging with ease. Seriously, the clean dodge left the young fighter utterly stunned. His timing was completely off, but how was that possible? The giant scoffed, explaining that his power came with a catch. As the inner lock closes, the victim's physical stats degrade. Su Li looked down at his left arm, realizing his movements had slowed to a crawl. The killer chuckled, letting him know that this was just his first trick. Sweat dripped down the hero's face as dread settled deep in his chest. Now the brute was ready to unleash his second deadly technique. He twists the boy's wrist, squeezing it with intense force. Su Li tenses up. He cannot understand the strange sensation inside his bones. Yet it feels familiar. It keeps him from outright panicking, but he cannot relax. There is simply no room to relax as his opponent makes a move. The attacker boasts that the kid will not be able to use his left hand because it is blocked. He mockingly adds that only a special key can suspend these physical seals. This does not shock Su Li at all since he has been here before. He knows exactly what this feels like, and he just needs to break the lock. Snatching a jagged shard from the dirt, our fearless fighter makes his move. He mutters that this shard is enough. The killer freezes in absolute shock. Shocked indeed, he never expected such terrifying determination from the young kid. Biting his lip through the agony, Su Li starts tearing the lock right out. It is a horrifying sight, but in under a minute the metal lock drops. It hits the dirt along with a bloodied scrap of his torn jacket. Grinning like a madman, the furious Su Li mutters his brutal code. He will rip it out. If he cannot pick a lock, he destroys it. Now that absolutely nothing is holding him back, the tense criminal hesitates, wondering what to do next. The killer looks down at the discarded lock on the floor and notices it vibrating. Right then it rises. The metal piece begins to float in the air. It hovers away from the torn cloth in a bizarre way. Suddenly, the floating lock flies back, digging straight into Su Li's skin again. His hand goes limp. Su Li instantly realizes his movements are weakening again. He feels a surge of panic, realizing he cannot easily break this curse. The performer laughs aloud, bragging about his perfect synergy. He shouts that defending with only one hand is going to be impossible. He demands to know why the kid did not just surrender to Sun Hun. The killer tells him to stop resisting, but the angry fighter fires back. "Shut your mouth," Su Li barks, before suddenly launching a vicious kick. The heavy blow clips the killer's ear as Su Li roars in defiance. But the furious opponent catches his leg, calling him a stupid, arrogant brat. He strikes again. The merciless man delivers a devastating blow to the chin. A devastating strike to the jaw sends Su Li flying backward through the air. Somehow the stubborn warrior stays on his feet, realizing the killer landed his mark. His vision goes blurry. He realizes something is terribly wrong. Everything is turning into a blurry mess, and the cold-blooded killer just smiles. He asks if Su Li really wants to keep fighting a losing battle. The villain has attached another lock, this time right on the boy's lower eyelid. Blinded completely, he is left entirely helpless in the cold, creeping dark. The killer sneers from the shadows, claiming the boy is finally out of his way. Furious, Su Li realizes the sneaky bastard has slipped into his blind spot. This is looking like an absolute nightmare. Can he even pull off a comeback now? Heart pounding, he knows he must locate his enemy immediately. But the deadly assassin has already positioned himself silently right behind his back. With a swift, deadly swing of his arm, the killer strikes. He catches Su Li completely off guard, forcing him to spin around in panic. The impact slams right into his eyes, sparking a pain that is 10 times worse. He barely blocks the strike in time, leaping back several meters to create some distance. Even with the block, the agony is real. Su Li realizes his eyes are locked shut. Completely locked shut. His right eye is totally useless now, but somehow he can still barely see. Things are incredibly blurry, but it is enough to keep him in the fight. The killer mocks him, saying one turn locks hands, but the eyes need 2 turns. That means the kid still has a shot. Su-lei is absolutely fuming. He spits out a fake thank you, but inside he just wants this freak dead. Right then Su-lei senses something is off. He stares ahead, trying to read the killer. He cannot quite put his finger on it, but the vibes are completely wrong. Why did this psychopath leave Park Sun-young free of those magical locks? He did not even need ropes to trap her. Why would he leave her unlocked? There are no easy answers here, and time is rapidly running out. The killer mockingly asks if the girl is distracting him, leaving Su-lei speechless. The psycho complains that he wants a fair fight, but his prey is distracted. It is incredibly insulting to a professional killer when his prey does not pay attention. He says one hostage is plenty to bait Sun Hun, so he will let the kid go. He is actually going to let the young man run away. A panicked Su-lei realizes the trap. The bastard is going to execute the girl. He lunges forward instantly. The cold killer swings his weapon down at the helpless Park Sun-young. But our main character has other plans and throws himself into the line of fire. He leaps right in front of the blade, shielding her body with his own. The psychopath laughs. He knew the boy would try to save her. He threatens to stop the boy's heart, reaching for another deadly lock to finish him. The killer is desperate to end this, launching a crushing blow directly at him. The strike rushes toward his chest, but he swings his backpack up just in time. The bag takes the brunt of the blow, keeping him perfectly safe from harm. He tumbles hard, bruised, aching, but fully awake. The stunned killer just stares in silence. The killer mockingly asks if the stupid kid actually thought a cheap bag would save him. It is a pathetic excuse for a shield, but watch how Su-lei stands up. The killer sneers, asking if he actually believed that useless trick would save him. Finding his footing, Su-lei grins and says things are actually looking up. His confidence completely throws the killer off, leaving the villain utterly speechless. He cannot comprehend how the boy is moving or where all the locks went. Shattered pieces of metal lie, uselessly scattered, all over the dirty floor. They are completely broken, destroyed, and no longer pose any kind of threat. The villain is lost, but a calm Su-lei asks if he knows about replacements. Unzipping his backpack, the young man prepares to show him a little trick. He pulls out the severed head of Jack, sending a cold shiver down the room. The locksmith freezes in pure shock, completely unable to process this horror. He stares at the grisly sight, desperately wishing this was all just a bad dream. It turns out one of those locks is hooked directly onto the lower lip of the creepy smiling psychopath. Su-lei has to admit that this really is not a good idea, asking why the killer tied up Park Sun-young. He wonders why a guy with supernatural powers would rely on simple ropes instead of his magic. Maybe there is a hard limit to how many locks he can actually manifest. Or maybe he just cannot use any more right now. Su-lei realizes the lock must be physically attached to someone, while an enraged Jack keeps screaming profanities in the background. The furious locksmith snaps that he did not ask about that, instantly changing the subject. Su-lei just stares back in complete confusion as the enemy starts shouting. He demands to know why the dead killer in the bag is breathing down his neck. Su-lei shrugs. Why does he care so much anyway? Still, he admits that he took care of this freak, but honestly has no clue why Jack is still alive. Su-lei notes he did not really want to show him this, but there is no point hiding him from a dead man. He tells the locksmith that he is going to die here anyway, completely shocking the massive brute. Absolutely furious, the locksmith charges forward, screaming about how arrogant this kid is. He reminds Su-lei that those locks are completely unbreakable. In mocking Su-lei's pathetic defensive stance, the locksmith bellows that if the rumors about the legendary killer Jack are fake, there is no way he is losing to a complete amateur, he continues, throwing nasty insults, but Su-lei stays completely calm, refusing to take the bait. Our hero just smiles. Very soon this brute is going to learn exactly who the real rookie is. Right after saying that, the brave youngster delivers a crushing, bone-shattering punch right to his enemy's jaw. Fighting off rising panic, the locksmith realizes this kid is way too fast to give him breathing room. Gripping his lock tight, he knows he must shut him down immediately. Blinded by absolute, blinding fury, he lunges forward with incredible speed, screaming that he will teach this arrogant brat a brutal lesson. But Su Li just laughs. Holding that lock makes him way too slow. And that is completely true. Wasting no more precious time, our hero takes aim and lands another devastating punch straight to his chin. The battered locksmith tries to ignore the pain, realizing he must activate his special ability. Su Li notices this immediately. He can tell the guy is getting desperate and trying to end things with one single strike, so he stays on high alert. He needs to strike first, while the massive brute is still charging up. That is the only way to catch him off guard. The desperate killer swings wildly, throwing a heavy punch, but Su Li is completely confident he can dodge the lock. With an effortless leap, he slides safely to one knee, completely untouched. The locksmith sneers, asking if he is just running away now. Making another fist, the massive brute warns our hero to get ready, because things are about to get incredibly serious for him. Wait, watch this. The guy slams a heavy steel lock right into his own neck. Using a terrifying amount of brute force, Su Li watches in total disbelief, unable to comprehend why his enemy would lock himself up, while a cackling Jack celebrates his upcoming doom. Locking eyes with his opponent, the unshaven killer asks if he is ready to go another round. Watching closely, Jack notices a terrifying change in the enemy. So incredibly fast. Even without knowing what happened, Su Li decides to stick to his old playbook. His opponent repeats the exact same pattern, allowing the redhead to land some heavy strikes right to his head, but he stops blocking entirely, which is incredibly alarming to the young fighter. Su Li drives a brutal uppercut into his chin, but the man does not even flinch. He is completely unfazed, leaving Su Li desperately trying to. He desperately needs answers, but his mind is racing way too fast. Then the horrifying truth hits him. The bindings the killer wrapped around himself are actually blocking all his pain. Showing absolutely zero mercy, the killer lunges forward and drives his fist straight into the young man's chest. Instantly, another heavy lock clamps down on Su Li's heart, leaving the poor kid completely helpless. Look at how fast things are spiraling. Screams at the redhead to show this complete freak what he can actually do because time is up. The cold killer warns the boy's heart will stop completely with 3 turns, but Su Li just laughs it off, mockingly asking if it is really true that there are only 3 turns left, grinning through pain. The redhead says that is plenty of time to put his enemy down for good. Off his enemy first, entirely unfazed by the cheap provocation, the ruthless villain quietly replies, the brutal and lethal reality of a sudden cardiac arrest. No warning, the desperate young hero suddenly charges back into the fight, aiming a vicious elbow strike right at his opponent's head. But the locksmith easily blocks the blow, trapped with absolutely no other choice in this moment. Su Li realizes his only choice is to fight with pure, raw desperation. Soon, the young hero realizes the killer is not counterattacking at all. He is just defending. Coldly, the locksmith announces that the moment has come to show off the full extent of his deadly skills, a chilling threat. Panicking inside, Su Li desperately forces himself to keep fighting to his absolute physical limit. Because there is no backing out now, suddenly his vision begins to blur and his physical strength completely vanishes as his blood pressure violently spikes, staring down at the boy who has collapsed to his knees. The killer calmly explains what is happening. Nausea will set in first, and then his lungs will starve for air. When the lock blocks the vital flow, the body completely loses control of its limbs. Deprived of blood from the heart, the brain quickly shuts down. That is the actual essence of a pump blockage, dragging himself up. The brave youth vows to fight to his absolute last drop of blood, throwing himself into the struggle, claiming he knows his body best, but his killer simply steps aside. Su Li crashes heavily onto the cold floor, completely defeated, as his enemy remarks that raw willpower alone is never enough. Terrified, Jack begs the redhead to stand, but the boy is completely spent and agonizingly broken. Leaning down over him, the pitiless killer whispers that he will graciously him pass to the next world. Watching in shock, Jack cannot believe his only hope is dying so pointlessly, channeling a strange energy into his hand. Armed with raw power, the killer swings at the helpless boy, shouting that this is the end. But Jack's head flies to the rescue, slamming directly into the unshaven killer's side. The furious psychopath screams in rage, blaming Su Li for his ruined reputation. He rants about being called a fake, while the young man slowly drags himself up. As they prepare to settle their score, they completely forget their enemy is still standing. The massive brute throws his head back, unleashing a wild, bloodthirsty roar. He screams that he is absolutely fed up with this. Jack dodges frantically in the air. Jack feels like a literal soccer ball with how much he is getting kicked around here. Suddenly, a desperate plan clicks in Su Li's mind. This is his absolute last shot at survival. Without hesitation, the boy bolts forward. His sudden move immediately draws the killer's tense gaze. The mechanic barks out, "Where do you think you are going?" Our fearless hero shouts back that he is not running away. His move makes no sense until he grabs his opponent. Locking his arms around the stunned killer, he yells that this is his final move. Behind them, the terrified killer spots sharp metal rebar jutting from the concrete. There is no saving them now. Both men plummet directly toward the deadly spikes. The cold steel impales them both, drawing a massive spray of blood. Crimson blood splatters the ruins. The impaled mechanic gasps for air, his breathing shallow and heavy. He mocks Su Li's suicidal plan as absolute madness. Yet there is no turning back. Su Li smiles through the intense pain. He whispers that he can heal, but the villain will die right here. With his death, this whole domain collapses. The killer laughs, calling him naive. He sneers about the key, raging that he will just push the kid's body away. If Su Li dies first, escaping this metal spike will be incredibly easy. But he cannot move. Both of them remain pinned, bleeding out rapidly. Panicking, the killer mutters that they need to free themselves right now. It is getting too late. Suddenly, a strange sensation washes over the villain. Something is deeply wrong, but he cannot quite put his finger on it. Just inches away, he spots a blood-stained lock, shattered and completely ruined. Shaken, he demands to know how Su Li did this with a stopped heart. Barely clinging to life, the young man struggles to whisper through the pain. Coughing up blood, he admits that his own end is drawing near. But he explains that when they fell, he willingly let his heart tear. The piercing metal smashed the lock, forcing his soul to finally break free. With a mocking smile, the boy asks if his grand plan makes sense now. He taunts the villain, adding that this metal will not mend anytime soon. The shattered lock cannot reform, sending a wave of sheer panic through his foe. A violent twitch grips the killer's eye as the brutal reality sinks in. He has lost completely, and there is absolutely nothing left to fight for. Moments later, the limp villain slumps backward, completely devoid of life. Watching his enemy die, Su Li smiles weakly and lets out a long sigh. Every single agonizing moment was worth it for this final, desperate victory. Staring at the broken lock, he knows this gamble paid off. With the upper hand, he soon breaks free from the heavy metal bars. Agony, every bone in his body screamed, but he had to push through. Impossible. If his heart had actually burst, he would have died from cardiac arrest. That brutal shock could have easily finished him off. As he recovered, Jack lay on the floor and asked if it always felt like this. He wondered how he survived such insane regeneration, but the hero simply said it beats dying. But the killer quietly thought to himself that he would have preferred death. Then Jack asked what they should do with the tied-up Park Sun-jun. He suggested leaving her behind, but a calm Su Li silently watched the crying girl. Slowly he began to step toward her, drawing closer as he thought deeply. Refusing to rush, he thought deeply, then, without a second thought, he untied the hostage, who had suffered so much under that cruel torturer. The shocked girl immediately realized that her hands were finally free. She could not believe this mysterious hero was actually saving her life. Can you blame her? Anxious and eager, she pulled off her mask and ripped the green tape from her lips, giving herself the freedom to finally see. Move and speak. Tense and panicked, she knew she had to escape immediately. She wanted to finish off her attacker if he was nearby, but then she suddenly froze. Her legs trembled violently, as if she had just witnessed the impossible. Looking around, she found herself standing on a playground right next to the house. She just could not believe it. Meanwhile, Su Li returned to his secret hideout. He finally had a quiet moment to wash the grime off his face. Leaning his hands heavily on the sink, he quietly fell into some deep, serious thoughts. His sharp eyes were dead cold, yet incredibly serious and terrifying. Stepping out, he dried his wet hair while Jack called out to him. The psychotic killer teased him, saying that looks did not even matter. But he had to admit, the kid had a pretty impressive fit physique. He could not believe there was not a single scar left on him. Our emotionless hero said absolutely nothing. Then Jack asked another question. He wanted to know if all contract holders were as strong as that bearded monster. Su Li did not understand. Smiling, Jack explained how things worked. Defeating all the executors would be the only way to prove his strength. Did the kid think his regeneration was his only trick? Our hero remained silent. He demanded a straight answer instead of this endless nonsense. Jack sighed. If that elite mercenary's power was still at the exact same level from 10 years ago, then he was nothing more than a bottom-tier rookie in the deep abyss. These words deeply troubled our young warrior, sending his mind racing. The psycho asked why he was scared. He found it terrifying to be the sole victor. Cunning Jack noted they would soon see how long the kid could actually survive. Su Li coldly replied that his only goal was to eliminate every single serial killer. His opponent laughed, asking why he was so obsessed with doing that. The psychopath brought up what happened with Sun Hung and then his sister Park Sun Jun. He asked if the boy had ever considered the consequences of his endless hunt. Who would protect these people if all the contract owners were wiped out? But our cold-blooded fighter knew the truth was much simpler than that. But that was the harsh reality. His words made absolutely no sense to the figure behind the mask, who only stared back with a creepy grin. Shaking under his blanket, the young vigilante kept repeating that these monsters must be stopped. The kid was sick of how things worked. He was ready to step up and actually change things. Meanwhile, under a nearby roof, two guys were trading brutal blows. They fought like wild animals, straining every single muscle to knock each other flat. They pushed and shoved, but neither fell. Even with shaking legs and burning lungs, they fought to absolute exhaustion. They were completely spent, but get this. This was a completely ridiculous matchup, a skinny kid versus a massive fat guy. The thin fighter was drenched in sweat and gasping, but he loved the adrenaline. The heavy guy smirked, asking if he was comfortable standing up so high, looking at him with disgust as if he were just a piece of meat. The skinny guy snapped at the insult and shoved the big man back. Taken completely off guard, the heavy guy stumbled backward, nearly falling flat on his back. His balance was totally off. To be honest, they both looked pretty ridiculous, flailing around as if they had lost their minds in the heat of battle. Rage filled the brunette's eyes. He clenched his fist, screaming at the fat freak. The big man yelled back, telling him to stop because abilities were banned. He kept whining about the rules, but the angry fighter did not care. He refused to stop. He completely ignored the unfair rules. Fueled by pure hatred, the skinny kid called him a filthy pig. They locked arms and clashed once again, struggling to overpower one another. The heavy guy was totally spent, which only made the skinny kid smile. But right then, a sudden noise made both of them turn around. Look at this entrance. A massive glass window shatters into pieces. A figure in a bright pink helmet slides in, landing on one knee. Nobody in the room expected this mysterious girl to crash their party. She casually asked if it was just the two of them, raising her hand. Then, with zero warning, she whipped a throwing blade right at them. It caught the heavy man directly in the forehead, terrifying his skinny opponent. Furious, the skinny fighter charged straight at the uninvited killer. But the girl was incredibly fast. She leaped up and kicked him hard. The brutal blow connected right with his face, sending him flying backward. He bounced away like a ragdoll while she smoothly ended her slide. She rested one hand on the cold floor, scanning the room for more targets. Suddenly, she heard a calm, mature voice cutting through the silent room. A middle-aged gentleman in a white suit stood there, observing the scene. He kept his hands calmly behind his back, unfazed by the sudden guest. The gray-haired gentleman smiled, saying it had been quite a long time. He chuckled, mentioning he heard her YouTube channel was not doing so well lately. She did not bother to answer. Instead, she charged forward at full speed. In one swift motion, she drew her razor-sharp katana. She leaped high into the air, wielding her katana with effortless grace. A mysterious woman moves with fluid grace, instantly drawing the gaze of the unbothered old man. She presses a blade against his neck, mockingly telling him his greeting sounded like a stroke. The old man certainly did not expect such attitude from someone holding a blade. She drops a chilling warning, revealing she already knows about his special team for the upcoming hunt targeting super rookies. Keeping her cold steel pressed close, she orders the old man to swap places with her, a demand that catches him completely off guard. The gray-haired leader tries to object, but she coldly reminds him that two of his rookies are already dead. He could easily be next. She confidently brags that they stand zero chance against her, leaving him with absolutely no choice but to accept her terms. Still, the Pushy assassin forces him into a forced partnership. Before making her exit, she waves and promises to keep in touch. Then she leaps right out the window, leaving the old man alone in the silence. For a moment, he just stands there, frozen with his hands clasped behind his back. Suddenly, his arms begin to tremble. With pure rage, shaking, he mutters to himself that the blood moon will return soon. Seething with anger, the gray-haired senior spits out her name and vows he will never let her succeed. Cut to a pitch-black night where two young guys holding cameras are wandering deep into a thick, overgrown forest. Surrounded by nothing but wild weeds, the guy in the white t-shirt asks if his partner captured everything on video, wanting to make sure they can trace their steps back, but the cameraman complains it is too dark to see anything. Annoyed, the first guy snaps that he told him to use night mode, but the cameraman just shrugs and turns on his phone flashlight instead. But wait, look at this. As he sweeps the light around, he suddenly spots a figure standing ahead. It looks like a stunning woman, yet she seems completely lifeless. Terror paralyses them on the spot, and then blood-curdling screams echo through the trees. Meanwhile, Sun Hong is casually smoking near a doorway while his friends watch that exact footage, getting totally freaked out by the creepy painted mannequin. Spooked guys can't understand why a creepy scarecrow is out in the mountains. While our blonde protagonist quietly snuffs out his cigarette, with a slight smirk he asks if they are playing some silly game of courage, wondering why they thought he wouldn't care. One of his buddies explains it is actually a massive viral trend called mystery. Note, it basically generates a random location nearby, inviting players to go on an adventure right near them. Except every single spot is incredibly eerie and haunted. Legend has it that if you go, you might find someone just standing there, grinning creepily at you, or a terrifying mannequin. Even worse, you could stumble upon a bizarre gathering of cult-like strangers burning a bonfire and chanting weird things under their breath. The hyped-up brunette adds that these locations are crawling with killers, claiming someone even found actual human remains stuffed in a garbage bag. Skeptical Sun Hong thinks it is completely fake news, but his gullible friends are totally sold, visibly shivering from fear. His buddy challenges him to go check it out himself if he's so sure. But downloading a sketchy app feels like a massive waste of time to the blonde guy. His friend insists it is the easiest shortcut to going viral nowadays, especially if you upload a. The excited guys bragged about pulling in over 100,000 views on a single YouTube upload. These guys were convinced they would become instant stars and snag a silver play button, so they begged the invincible Sun Hoon to join them, knowing he could easily smash any thugs in their way. But Sun Hoon had absolutely zero interest in online fame and told them he was too busy. His disappointed friends couldn't understand why he would pass up such an easy shot at glory. Refusing to waste another second on useless chatter, the quiet powerhouse simply turned to walk away. He waved a lazy goodbye, leaving his annoyed friends grumbling behind him. The girl felt uneasy going alone, but her chubby friend insisted they would be completely fine. Nearby, a public broadcast announced that a rare super moon eclipse was scheduled to begin very soon. The cosmic event was set to darken the night sky in less than an hour. Meanwhile, Sun Hoon walked down the street, rapidly texting his younger sister to check in. But she completely ignored his calls and texts, leaving him deeply annoyed and quite worried. He wondered how long Sun Jun was going to keep up this irritating silent treatment. His mind flashed back to the hospital, where he had been tossing and turning in agony. A violent nightmare had gripped him, forcing him to relive a truly horrifying memory. He had bolted upright, screaming demands about where those thugs had taken his sister. Waking up fully, he realized it was just a dream, and then he gasped in surprise. He turns his head, and wait, is that actually Sun Jun standing there, completely unharmed? He could barely believe his eyes as he stared at his sister, who lacked even a single scratch. Overjoyed, Sun Hoon lunged forward to hug her, demanding answers. But she flinched away, coldly telling him to keep his hands off her. Fuming, she revealed that she was grabbed by dangerous thugs who target her because of him. She warned he would pay with his life if his actions ever endangered her again. Her words left him utterly speechless and deeply shaken. She threw his phone onto the bed, leaving him confused as to why she even had it. With a parting insult, she marched out, leaving the blonde boy completely stunned. Trapped in his hospital bed, he could only watch her go, his mind spinning in circles. He yelled out for Sun Jun, but only heavy silence answered his cries. Lost in stress, Sun Hoon had no idea what was actually going on. Even his teacher was completely in the dark about the details of her sudden return. Apparently, the mysterious person who saved his sister had also recovered his phone. But right then, with classic terrible timing, his phone suddenly buzzes with a brand new notification. His heart leaped, hoping it was a reply from Sunjun, but his excitement was short-lived. It was just his idiot friends sending a pin of their location for their late-night adventure. He nearly smashed his screen in frustration, utterly sick of their reckless games. Having already told them he was out, he just wanted them to leave him alone. They really never learn, do they? But as he looked up in annoyance, something strange caught his eye. His anger evaporated as he stared at an unusual shop directly ahead. It looked totally ordinary, yet a powerful, unexplainable urge drew him toward it. Entranced, the young man pushed open the door and stepped into the dim interior. Moments later, Sun Hoon found himself sitting face-to-face with a mysterious fortune teller. Under the flickering glow of a single candle, she wasted absolutely no time. The stern, sharp-faced woman peered at him with an incredibly haughty expression. She asked what brought him here, dryly guessing that his luck had run completely dry. He didn't come for love or fortune. Shaken and flustered, the young man denied it. When the fortune teller asked his real reason, the young man felt completely awkward. He could only hint that he needed her psychic abilities for his own plans. He stumbled helplessly over his words, unable to form a single clear sentence. This hesitation deeply annoyed the woman. She strictly ordered him to speak faster. Panic overtook the young man as he shouted, asking if she saw anyone standing near him. His outburst shocked the old lady. Sweating profusely, Sun Hong knew this sounded insane. It seemed like absolute nonsense, but it was the only logical explanation after his survival. HWA Jai had vanished under bizarre circumstances. Right as Park Sun-jun was saved, the tense young man realized something else. An invader lived inside his body. Every single clue proved it. The terrified blonde desperately wanted to purge this hijacked parasite. It controlled him when asleep. Surprisingly, the calm fortune teller smiled. She gave a direct confirmation to her client. Yes, she saw someone there. She saw a presence hovering right over the agitated young man, shocking him further. Vaulting out of his chair, he practically screamed that he knew it all along. He locked his gaze intently with the fortune teller, demanding to know more. He shouted that he wanted to meet this spirit, asking if it was possible. The cold old woman replied that to meet him, he must actively search for him. Her cryptic advice deeply puzzled the discouraged Sun Hong, who felt completely helpless. He couldn't do that, but suddenly, a realization hit the young man like a truck. He knew exactly how to trigger the meeting. A fierce motivation burned inside him. Thanking the old psychic, the excited young man immediately bolted. He ran off in pure joy, ignoring her angry screams to pay for the session. She screamed, calling him a total bastard. But wait, he was totally clueless about the shadow trailing right behind him. He sprinted right past an inconspicuous man in black, who was actually Shou Li. With his face hidden, Shou Li decided to shadow him, the quiet tracker calmly. Trailed several paces behind Sun Hong, who was sprinting blindly toward his friends. Naturally, the clueless blonde got hopelessly lost, even with a GPS navigation app. He squinted at his screen, completely unable to decide which direction to take. Somehow he finally made the correct turn. Meanwhile, the silent tracker analyzed the current situation, putting the pieces together. According to his contact, dangerous contract holders were actively hunting the blonde. They falsely believed that Sun Hong was the slayer of Crazy Jack. Tracking down the real killers would normally be tough, but Shou Li was on it. Under his hood, Shou Li knew he didn't need to search. The enemy was coming. He expected hitmen to ambush the blonde soon, when his phone suddenly vibrated. Shou Li immediately pulled out his device to check the incoming alert. Reading the message, he abruptly turned on his heel and walked away. He abandoned the chase while the clueless Sun Hong was still lost. From inside his bag, Crazy Jack's severed head asked if they were letting him go. Shou Li calmly confirmed it. After all, he had already planted a tracker on Park Sun-jun. He had secretly installed a locator app on the kid's phone earlier. Crazy Jack amusedly called him a bastard as Shou Li continued on his way. He walked forward in silence, but finally agreed with his new ally. Chasing that blonde punk wasn't their priority right now. They had bigger issues. Looking up, the calm fighter warned that a blood moon eclipse was starting. In a serious tone, He added that they had to reach the ceremony immediately. With that, he left. Late that night, a completely exhausted Sun Hong finally arrived at the spot, muttering to himself that he really needed to quit smoking. The tired kid never knew such a weird place existed nearby. It was a total mystery to him. Suddenly on edge, the young man grew anxious, wondering why his friends hadn't called him yet. To start, the blonde-haired boy decided to call up one of his friends. Nothing, the number was completely unavailable. This felt wrong. The confused hooligan wondered why the guys had shut off their phones, guessing they might have turned on airplane mode. The fortune teller Ajima warned him to find his friends, but that didn't resolve his confusion. Suddenly, Sun Hong remembered an app called Mysterious Note. Quickly launching it on his phone, the excited young man recalled that they wanted to film a video, meaning he could track them down easily. If he joined them, checking the map, their markers were only 300 meters away. But as he stared closer, the suspicious young man realized something was off. If the app was glitching like this, it had to be a completely different location. Still, the reckless kid brushed his worries aside and pressed forward, hoping it worked. Meanwhile, get this, our hero got a text from an unknown number. It was for the opening ceremony. Late that night, the incredibly calm Su Li sat quietly on some hidden steps, lost deep in thought. Blank-faced, he carefully analyzed the bizarre text glowing on his screen. The app called Mysterious Note had launched, something he had never seen. Asking his ally, he wondered if anyone actually named a ritual that, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate joke. But Jack shook his head, completely clueless about the strange invitation. Still, his ally knew that these dark blood moon rituals were real. Warning that the entrance changed constantly depending on the region, the psychic added that they had to investigate. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. A new system notification appeared, stating that his final destination was locked. Ready, the system started. The system asked if he wanted to start. The alert fighter instantly realized that with the target only 100 meters away, time was running out. He locked his eyes on the coordinates, leaving Jack totally bewildered. Grabbing his pack, the brave fighter bolted with a grim expression, leaving his ally in the dust. After sprinting a short distance, the daredevil suddenly halted, freezing as if hitting an invisible wall. Total darkness, everything around him instantly went pitch black, leaving only the dim path directly ahead visible. But a seasoned veteran like him was completely unfazed by this creepy atmosphere. Then, just a few inches from his feet, the young man spotted rotting human bones. Talk about an alarming sign. He realized that Mysterious Note was connected to the ceremony for the future contract holders. And that skull definitely did not end up here by accident. Su Li figured the owner was lurking nearby when suddenly an unknown man approached him. Our serious hero immediately threw a heavy punch, but the panicked stranger screamed out that he surrendered and begged him to stop. The scruffy guy demanded to know who he was, and Su Li asked him the exact same question. For the first few 10 seconds, our calm fighter stayed silent, carefully analyzing the stranger and his surroundings. Finally, he bowed his head and apologized, saying his reflexes just took over. Gesturing toward the scattered human remains, the stranger muttered that they needed to sound the alarm right away after seeing something so horrific. The homeless man claimed he lived nearby and had seen plenty of things like this, making Su Li ask if there were more human bones hidden around here. The unkempt man muttered that these poor souls had been struck by trains, which explained why they were sticking out of the earth, but then he hinted there might be another reason, leaving our main character deep in thought over what that could mean. Next, the eccentric guy dragged his thumb across his throat, hinting at a cold-blooded murder. Su Li asked if he really believed a killer had deliberately left all these bodies behind, and the stranger whispered that it got even worse. Suddenly, the homeless man blurted out that he actually saw the terrifying massacre happen, which instantly grabbed Su Li's attention. The young man pressed for more details, but the stranger snapped back that this area was far too dangerous, telling him to get lost. He roughly shoved the boy back and started stomping away into the dark. The persistent fighter was not about to walk away, standing frozen as he calculated his next move. Our fearless fighter turned right back to the scruffy gentleman, who abruptly froze and slowly turned around, walking right up to him. Su Li said he only had one question left, but the eccentric warned him again to stay away. Step by step, the fearless Lee closed the distance, demanding to know why. He kept hanging around such a creepy wasteland. Suddenly, the suspicious man reached deep into his pocket. Watch closely. Our highly observant hero immediately realized he was pulling a weapon. Reacting in a split second, he lunged forward and grabbed the man's wrist, sending a wicked sharp knife clattering onto the dirt. The attacker felt a searing pain from the boy's iron grip, but he stubbornly refused to speak. Staring directly into his eyes with an incredibly chilling, intense gaze, our stern hero calmly asked if he was the killer. Meanwhile, a highly agitated Sun Hong was wandering through a creepy, abandoned building, desperately searching for Gong, Jin and Yang Gang, casting his flashlight around and begging them to answer. This eerie, crumbling place felt exactly like an abandoned school, leaving him completely terrified out of his mind. He just could not wrap his head around this bizarre school, especially since there was no name plaque at the entrance and it was completely missing from the map. Suddenly, the terrified blonde spotted a dark silhouette ahead, stammering to himself that it must be a ghost. He even panicked that some notorious serial killer had returned, sending icy shivers straight down his spine. Terrified, the cowardly young man decided that knowing his friends wouldn't be hanging around here, he decided to head home. Heading right toward his front door, the young man suddenly froze, as if something had just clicked inside his head. The confused punk wondered why he felt so scared, since he always considered himself a tough guy. The youngster wondered what would happen if a ghost or monster jumped out, because he carried something far scarier inside. Spotting a dirty mirror head, he grinned like a psychopath, his eyes flashing pitch black for a moment and revealing hints of a dangerous second personality. Meanwhile, the serious Su Li grabbed the suspect tightly by the wrist, demanding to know if he was a murderer and where all those bones came from. Getting no answer but seeing pure terror in his eyes, the ruthless hunter grabbed the man by his throat and started choking him. Then, the fighter slammed his opponent down, making him hit the very back of his head hard on the floor, causing blinding agony. The dead serious fighter demanded to know if the beggar had slaughtered the victims, whose bones were scattered all over. The terrified man stammered out that he had absolutely nothing to do with it. But Su Li wasn't buying it. The suspicious fighter demanded to know why he carried a knife in his hand then, leaving the helpless beggar completely speechless and utterly terrified. Suddenly he cried out that he only wanted to protect himself, begging the young hunter for mercy, who actually listened to his story. When the beggar first saw the killer, he immediately realized his fate was sealed and that death was coming. Then the murderer warned him to keep quiet if he wanted to survive, ordering him not to leave this place. The heartless killer forced him to stay put and scare off anyone who wandered close, making it his sole responsibility. The terrified beggar tried running away multiple times, but the maniac sewed a tracker into his gut, making escape impossible. Clasping his hands together, the poor guy begged Su Li to believe him, pleading with absolute and genuine desperation. Our main hero didn't buy the story, though something about this whole setup felt rather off to him. Looking closely at the weapon, he noticed the blade was too clean with 0 bloodstains on it, so he immediately demanded to know where the maniac who locked this poor bastard up in here was hiding. But the beggar was too terrified to answer. Eventually, he pointed toward a hill where a metal container stood, serving as the murderer's lair. The sharp-eyed Su Li immediately took a good look and knew exactly where he had to go next. The captive man begged him for help, but Su Li pointed out that there were too many inconsistencies in his words, so he asked him to sit down for now. Meanwhile, Sun Hong was exploring a creepy, abandoned school, searching through the empty classrooms but finding absolutely nothing useful. There was only one room left. And stepping inside, he found only piles of rubble and cracked walls. The blonde boy highly doubted there would be anything useful here, but figured it was still worth checking out. Suddenly, he spotted weird green goo on the floor and accidentally stepped right in it. The highly annoyed kid immediately started wiping off his favorite sneakers, absolutely furious that his clean kicks got ruined. The young man decided to head straight home to avoid getting into any more trouble. But then his eyes caught a strange carving on the wall. It pointed to a secret meeting spot, though Sun Hong could not quite decipher it. Suddenly realizing he was exactly where he needed to be, he abandoned his plan of leaving. At the exact same time, Su Li quietly approached the massive steel container. The captured vagrant had told him about this spot, but the calm fighter sensed absolutely no presence inside the container, even though he was actively hunting a killer. He assumed his target had already fled to some other hiding spot. Yet he chose to linger at the scene for a moment to plan his next move. Just then, a sudden notification popped up on his phone, looking rather important. The serious warrior slowly pulled out his mobile phone. Looking closely at the screen, he saw stark white letters flashing against a pitch-black background. It ordered him to step through the door, a command that felt deeply unsettling. He did not feel any prying eyes on him, but his instincts kept him alert. He quickly remembered this was all a simulated ritual, making this bizarre setup feel expected. He was not easily surprised, but this next realization changed everything. The tied-up vagrant from earlier was definitely part of the test, a key detail to remember. At least that was his theory, and he had no intention of slowing down. Wasting no more time, he immediately reached out for the door handle. Keeping a completely cool head, he muttered that it was finally time to play a little game. His mind remained calm. Meanwhile, Sun Hong slowly pushed open one of the dusty doors inside the decaying, abandoned school. Pushing inside, the stunned blonde found himself in a luxurious and beautifully decorated room. It had a gorgeous view, leaving the young man completely speechless. This was indeed his childhood home, the exact place he once shared with his family. Talk about bad timing, he suddenly heard familiar human voices echoing from around the corner. Creeping forward quietly on tiptoe, he approached the kitchen where they were gathered. There sat his father, casually chatting about ordinary, everyday things. The boy instantly realized that this was a vivid memory from his early childhood days. Sitting right next to him was a gloomy, dark-haired kid staring down at the floor with a sad expression. With a start, Sun Hong realized that this kid was his past self, though it was quite difficult to recognize his younger appearance. But the young man remembered this exact emotional scene perfectly. All those old emotions came rushing back. Then, his father stood up from the table and gently told his young son that it was time to go see his mother one last time. They quietly said their farewells and began to walk out the door. But the present-day Sun Hong simply could not bear to stand there and watch it unfold. He turned his gaze away, feeling those old childhood wounds reopen in his heart. Just then his eyes caught a family photo sitting on the shelf. They all looked incredibly happy back then. Keeping his face completely blank, he stared silently at the glass frame. He thought to himself that those really were the good old days. His mother, father, and sister Park Sun Jun. But someone else was standing right at the edge, a strange, unfamiliar child. Instantly, Sun Hong's entire expression froze in shock. Something suddenly alarms him. The stunned young man stands there, wondering who this little boy with the pitch-black face actually is. Meanwhile, the fearless Su Li steps into the room, only to find it completely empty. Right then watch his face. His expression completely freezes in pure shock. His spine turning absolutely ice cold. Someone is standing right behind him, dressing him in a terribly familiar outfit, speaking in a shocking voice. The polite gentleman wearing glasses smiles, gently asking the boy not to leave the house. He expects him to listen. Suddenly, Su Li is a child again, staring up at his father with wide, disbelieving eyes. His loving father kneels, placing hands on the boy's shoulders. Shaken to his core, he just freezes. Then his mother calls out to her husband, saying it is time to go. The father clearly wants more time with his little boy, but Su Lei is entirely frozen. Right there stands his mother, whom he has missed so incredibly much. At the same time, his father realizes that they truly have to go. His wife playfully asks what is keeping him so rushed. The boy wants to weep. Finally, he sees the parents he lost so long ago, but he knows this is not the right time or place. Suddenly, he screams out, begging his parents not to leave him behind because he desperately needs just a few more moments with them. He remembers so clearly the horrific day his parents died. He absolutely refuses to let them walk away. The little boy begs to go home instead of staying here, but his mother smiles, reminding him of the awesome pool he had begged to visit. It was his own choice after all. Patting her sweet son on the head, she reassures him they're just meeting a friend and will return very shortly. His parents turn and head toward the front door. Su Lei needs a plan immediately. He scrambles to his feet, lunging forward to stop his loved ones from leaving. Blocking the doorway, the desperate child refuses to budge, screaming that they absolutely cannot leave. His frantic behavior starts to worry the Couple he knows with terrifying certainty that they will die if they walk out. But in this tiny 7-year-old body, he cannot protect them or himself out there. His confused parents exchange worried glances, but Su Li only has one thought. Echoing in his mind, honestly, would you let go of such a perfect lie? Suddenly a wave of intense dizziness and nausea hits him, totally out of nowhere. His panicked parents try to calm him down. Trying to figure out what is wrong, a moment later the boy blinks his eyes open, completely disoriented. He quickly realizes that he is locked inside a dark wardrobe, remembering exactly how his parents hid him. Here, back then, at just 7 years old, he had no idea what was happening. But now he realizes they must have slipped him a sleeping pill. It was their desperate attempt to save their child's life by putting him under. Bursting out of the wardrobe, the young man mutters to himself. He knows it all too well. They are about to die and he must prevent it. He has to save them from this horrific, inevitable tragedy. The panic sets in because the sleeping pill made him lose precious time. And what if they are already dead? His face turns dead serious. Under the crushing pressure, he lunges forward, grabbing the door handle. Gripping the handle, the child screamed inside his head, already running to help his parents. Suddenly, Su Li felt a dark premonition warning him not to open the door, filling him with dread. He wanted to peek through the tiny window first, to decide his next move, quickly stepping onto a nearby chair to reach it. He peeked through the glass, and his heart stopped at what lay behind. There lay the blood-soaked bodies of his parents, whom he was completely unable to save. His immediate thought was that this was the absolute end of his life. He had failed to protect the people he loved from death. Near the bodies of his mother and father, he saw a mysterious stranger drenched in dark blood. Su Li had never seen this person before, who suddenly felt the cold gaze on him. The murderer froze in place, suddenly realizing that someone was watching him. Turning abruptly, the killer nearly blinded the boy with a flash of his violet eyes, demanding to know what he was looking at. Terrified, the boy stumbled backward and crashed onto the floor, struggling to understand what had just happened. Snapping back to the present, Su Li felt a suffocating sense of anxiety but fought to stay calm. Gasping for breath, the stunned young man wondered what on earth was happening, but could not find any clear answers. He desperately wanted to return, his breathing still rapid, his fragile heart pounding. On the table, he saw a small container with glass on top, which was releasing a light, steady stream of smoldering smoke. He instantly recognized the specific plant that was currently burning and altering his consciousness. Now he understood that this leaf was what had triggered those vivid hallucinations, bringing back deeply buried memories. Su Li felt in his soul that this was like a raw journey to the past, where he felt everything again. He did not know if that man caused the tragic death of his parents, but that mystery demanded a real answer. At the same time, he could not tell if this brutal baptism was finally over. So he quickly shifted his focus back to the glowing system notification, congratulated him on passing the first test, urging him to choose the next step to begin the second trial. The exact same text appeared before Sung Hoon, who scoffed at the nonsense, spotting the smoldering plant on the table. The blonde guy realized it was responsible for the illusions. Then a suffocating wave of danger hit them all, and Park Sung-joon felt that if these events were truly from the past, then things had gone, letting his deepest, darkest terrors completely consume him instead of returning to reality. With his childhood terror finally wearing off, he now had to choose one of 3 doors to clear the trial. Looking up, Sung-hoon saw the 3 passages, but where they actually led was a complete mystery. Gathering his remaining physical strength, the fearless young man decided to investigate. Stepping cautiously toward the 3 doors, he noticed a thick slime on the left and middle handles, but the right one was spotless, which naturally caught his eye. That spotless door was definitely a trap. After hesitating for a few short seconds, the young man headed toward the middle passage, feeling deep down that he made the right choice. Meanwhile, a thin man and a fat man waited. The fighter glares greedily at the kid. Shocked, the boy asks who they are. He has never seen these people before. Meanwhile, a long-haired man is in the shower. Deep inside a luxurious room, something suddenly clicks in his mind. The man tenses up instantly, but hides his panic. A moment later, he steps out. He quickly throws on a bathrobe and heads straight to the kitchen counter. Leaning against the counter, he mutters in a low, strained voice, "He cannot stand this." Strange memories he has never lived are suddenly flooding his mind, giving him no peace. Gritting his teeth, the stern gentleman tries to make sense of the chaos. This should be impossible, but the harsh reality is staring him right in the face. Suddenly, the number 20,306 pops into his head, fueling his dread. A moment later, the phone rings. He picks up, keeping his voice dead serious. He demands answers immediately. In a chilling tone, he barks out a direct order. Bring me the guest list for room 20,306 right now. Meanwhile, back in the hallway, a skinny thug points out the blonde kid. He says this is their target, and a fat thug nods. That is exactly why they are here. Another annoyed man argues that the target is supposed to be inside the room. The fat guy disagrees. He stands his ground, claiming his setup was perfect. He just told them to move in after putting weird slime on the door handles. They bicker back and forth like complete idiots, arguing for what feels like forever. Standing nearby, a confused Sun Hong has no idea what is wrong with these creeps. They are acting like they know him, but he has never seen them before. Terrified, he freezes on the spot. He needs to get out of here without making a scene. Quietly, he begins to make a slow, careful move toward the exit. But his escape plan is instantly shattered before he can even reach the door. One of the thugs slams his fist hard against the wall. The loud crash startles him. Honestly, did he really think he could just sneak out? Blocking the hallway with a sickening grin, the thug asks a mocking question. Did you really think you could just walk away from the people waiting for you? Trembling, Sun Hong stammers an apology, but it does absolutely nothing to ease the tension. The situation is critical. The boy asks if they actually know who he is. A heavy silence falls over the hallway. Then the man sneers. He calls the question pathetic. Did the kid seriously think he wouldn't notice? Before Sun Hong can even nod, the thug grabs him violently by the collar. He yanks him close, hard. Growling, he warns that playing dumb is completely useless. Flashing a twisted grin, the killer warns that cheap tricks won't save him. Still eyeing the exit, Sun Hong desperately repeats to himself that he must escape. This place is pure poison. He needs to break free and run right now. The killer sneers that running is pointless, sending a fresh wave of panic through him. He mutters that the outside has 3 doors, but here there is only one. It is an unnatural, impossible nightmare. Rumors say this room is a twisted portal. A trap with absolutely no way out, and Sun Hong is completely losing his mind. The terrified kid has no idea what this maniac is even talking about. But there is no time to think. Survival is the only thing that matters now. Suddenly, Sun Hoon locked his sharp gaze on a ruined wooden window, and an escape plan instantly sparked in his mind, urging him to leap through that window right then. He grabbed his opponent's arm, desperately struggling to break free while maintaining a tight grip. Holding on tight, the brave youth shifted sideways to throw him. Off, he successfully executed a powerful wrestling maneuver, completely destroying his enemy's coordination. The enemy stumbled, and the surprised fat man froze, utterly shocked. Watching the clash unfold, meanwhile, the skinny attacker fell hard onto the cold concrete floor, gasping heavily for air, while his fat partner secretly celebrated his misery. Thinking the skinny guy got exactly what he deserved, the nimble blonde instantly realized he had a perfect chance to run, but a hand suddenly gripped his neck. The skinny fighter jumped up sharply and violently pulled the helpless youth backward toward him, hurling him aside and demanding to know why he was resisting. Feeling a sharp pain, Sun Hoon clutched his chest, choking as sweat poured. Suddenly calming down, he asked why he ran. And where Jack's killer was hiding, the terrified youth simply could not comprehend who they meant at first, but a chilling realization soon began to dawn on him. He had seen the long-haired monster who killed everyone. The blonde suddenly blurted out that he had footage of the deceased psychopath, but his frantic behavior seemed extremely strange. The confused fighter scoffed, suggesting the kid was talking about someone else. Asking if the kid was absolutely sure about this, but the cold-blooded Sun Hoon firmly insisted he did not kill Jack, but was his dead self. This statement alarmed the fighter, and really, can you blame him?